Hi guys, let's bring in the Twitch stream here. Hi everybody, welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. I'm your host Bill Whittle. It's our entertainment night. Some level should be our political night. It's the 11th of September 2023. 22 years ago today was the kind of certainly the defining crisis of my life in terms of the real world intruding on our little bubble of reality. And I'm just happy that we're not checking under our cars for bombs like we did in the days and weeks afterwards. There was never another attack on American soil of that magnitude or by the same people. And I maintain that's because we killed a lot of those bastards overseas, but that's open for discussion, and that's political discussion. Tonight is entertainment night. So got some new renderings to show you. Hi, everyone in New Zealand. My goodness. Wow. That's fantastic. I didn't know the internet reached that far. Yeah, I got a couple new renderings. I think I got the name of the show resolved. I got the final thing that I was waiting for with the John Boyd interview, which is the life-size cutout, and that looks like that'll be ready on Wednesday. So I'm going to call him tomorrow and set up an interview appointment. And then from there, we will see. Richard Santalisa says he was scheduled to be at a wireless conference in the North Tower a week after 9/11. I know somebody was going to have lunch or breakfast at the Windows on the World on that day, and they had to cancel at the last minute. Hello, Auckland. My goodness, so good to see so many Kiwis here. So anyway, I've been making progress all across the board here. So we've got the radio is here. Don't really want to unpack it, it's kind of in great condition. Hang on a second. On this little thing here. Oh, what the heck. Just don't tell anybody. This is for John, made possible by the members at GoLittle.com. Just don't tell him. Now, you have to have seen Midnight Cowboy to understand just exactly how much this little radio figures into the deal, because he's got two props. Joe Buck, when he gets on the bus, he's got a cowhide suitcase, which kind of showing his cowboy background. He's also got this groovy brand new AM/FM transistor radio on his shoulder, and that's the one. Same color and everything. 1969 Zenith Royal 44. And we also have right here. Hey, I'm walking here. That was a great ad-lib line. Maybe one of the greatest ad-lib lines of all time. We're going to put this on the back. It might be tough to read, but it says, presented to John Boyd with deepest respect, admiration, and affection from the members at BillWhittle.com. So it's time to play ball after a fair amount of punting and timeouts and all the rest of that crap. We're could not be happier with this, and I'm very, very grateful to the fellow in Finland who agreed to sell it, because there's only 3 of these in the world that I know of, I think, and it was not easy to find. So I think this will mean a lot to him. And if it doesn't, he can just kiss my royal Irish ring. So let's get this nice and safely packed away. The other interview gift is also here at the house. A couple little minor things I have to do to that to get that into, really almost perfect replica condition. So the members really stepped up with that. Eric was saying how great it was that they're crossing the street and the cab nearly hits them, and that was completely ad-libbed. And so was Dustin Hoffman banging on the hood, saying, "Hey, I'm walking here." It's perfect. So next time you see us, I think the Gorn will be. Obviously not going to replace him. I'll probably move him out of the shot for the John Voight thing. But every other person that we interview is going to be added to the cast of characters behind us. So we got, like I said, we got Gary Sinise, we got John Voight, Adam Baldwin, Tom Dreesen, Mike Rowe confirmed, and we'll start getting those pretty quick now that we've basically got our feet under us here. Only thing left to do is to do a couple quick tests for the recording, make sure that that's okay, and seeing if there's a way to back up the saving. So that's that. So that's good news. Now we're, as we have been for several weeks now, we're actually broadcasting on two different streaming programs at the same time. So just two new animations to show you guys. One of them is not going to appear too dramatic. When I started working with Chris on the interiors, I had to start thinking about what these modules actually do on the Major Mace Mattingly thing. I first just slapped them together and just found something that looked cool. And then I decided, build it up a little bit. And then I realized, no, it's too big and too dispersed. They're all on the Stratosphere Studio page on YouTube, all these different versions. And then I did one that I liked, but the storage modules are just too big, and so I swapped those around. So I'm pretty confident that this is the final version of the Moonbase. So again, you're going to have to pardon the slight delay here while I switch this over on two different platforms. So hang in there, and we'll do this as fast as we can here. So let's, first of all, we'll go to this. Oops, sorry. All right, here we go. So here comes the Moonbase render in 60 frames a second, glorious 4K. It's skipping a little it's skipping on both of them. I don't know if that's because we're trying to stream them both at the same time, but you get the idea. Put some animated astronauts in there for scale. Got the garage there. That's where Grimm's going to be spending all his time. That's a big storage module at the end there. And you have to loop it one more time, I think, here. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And I raised up that command module, put legs underneath it. It looks much cooler now. Looks much more like the Major Matt Mason toys that I'm kind of pretending it's based on. So we got that. And then, I guess everybody can hear me okay. So I am going to show you another one, which I think is kind of cool too. So let me turn this one off. All right, so the next one is an interior of the mission control area. Still obviously a work in progress for a lot of reasons, but it's real different than most of the science fiction areas you see these days. So ready? All right, so here we go. Boom for you. And boom for you. So, oops, gotta get out of this one. Hang on a second. Oop, try it again. Not you. There we go. So I was basically playing with different lighting levels here and different lighting colors. Um, the consoles look fantastic in the dark. It's hard to narrate both at the same time, but for the recorded version, I'll just go through this one more time. It's so weird that I have to get out of this file. I can't just hit play, start it again. Can I? Nope. Hang on. Just to narrate the thing for the recorded version here we go. So I'm playing with light levels. That's it, dark. Here's kind of the operational lighting level, kind of low light like that. I did a quick turn of the lights all the way up to full intensity, right about there. And then during nighttime, they're mostly going to be working in the red light conditions. So I just grabbed that animation, chucked it on there. It looks a little funny for Gordo because he's, like I said, it's just a stock animation. When we get ready to really do this for real, I'll have the motion capture suit on so that the eyes will match and all that stuff will be pretty groovy. So so that's that, and I thought it looked great, and I just that's it's always nice when you get a compliment. Eric says it looks very Star Trek the original series. That's exactly where I would like to be. Never touched the mic settings again. Yet, they seem a little hotter. In any event, the Gorn moves back and forth, and I never know how close he's going to be. It's just usually he waits till I come in on a Wednesday, Monday or Thursday night. It's just kind of a surprise. Miles in YouTube says, "Got to be careful because Gavin Newsom won't let you disturb the moon's surface." It's tempting to laugh at that, but he's absolutely right. I guarantee you that once or if we get to the point where we're actually doing commercial activities in space, the collectivists will really start trying to get some teeth into into a law making sure that nobody can mine an asteroid that's 7 million miles away. Bastards. This is actually the International Space Treaty that was signed, I don't know, back in the 70s or something. Basically said that you couldn't own outer space. To which I say, finders keepers. But apparently that's the actual law. I suppose I can see something to not being able to own the moon, or at least large parts of the moon. But then again, I can't remember if it's the moon or Mars. I think it must be Mars. I think Mars has about the same land surface area as the Earth. It's a much smaller planet, but we got a lot of oceans. So, the moon's it's a big place. It's one of the probably the fourth or fifth biggest moon in the solar system. It's a damn huge object, and I think if we need to do a little digging there, then they don't like it, they can come up and give us a ticket. Problem is, they don't come up and give us a ticket. They just, pass all these regulations. It's one of the main things about this Major Mace Mattingly thing. We're going to just be doing these launches, just these like the Sea Dragon launches, and just like a row of these, monster Saturn V, Nova rockets, just rows of them. And it's like, we're working here out of one of these islands near Inuiatak, one of the Marshalls. We just had to do it here because we could already tell that things starting to get a little dicey back home. Every time I see, I mentioned this guy, Hayes Gray Art, and I've tried to contact him twice, haven't heard back from him. I'm very disappointed about that because he does terrific work. But he's animated a bunch of these classic, designs that were actually made. And looking at the comments on them on YouTube, there's an awful lot of the same thing. And those comments come down to, why are we on the sucky timeline, Why couldn't we be on the timeline where this stuff was actually happening? It's called Hayes Gray Art, Bart, Hazegreey or AY, I don't remember, ART. But he's terrific. He's fantastic. He really does great work. But you get to see this this stuff that was planned, and I really genuinely believe it. We really could have done it. Um, Kaiwan 8 says the moon has the same GDP as Portugal. If you're Portuguese, then that is a well played backhanded slap, sir. I was thinking about backhanded slaps, and I have not heard back from James Wood. I suspect that's because I have an older email, because I'm quite sure he wouldn't just not answer. But I'll be seeing the gang again end of February, and I'm sorry, end of September, and I was going to say to him on air. I probably will say to him on air. James, I don't want to give you a backhanded compliment, but word in town is you're the smartest actor in all of Hollywood, which is impressive, but at the same time, it's a fairly low bar to clear. So there's that. Born too late to explore the new world, born too early to explore the galaxy, born just in time to witness man-made horrors beyond my comprehension, says Vincent De Tomaso in the YouTube stream. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm finally able to getting through more of the fourth turning, which is more on the this cyclic pattern of events, and those cycles are a human lifespan, and then apparently this seculum, I think it's called, but this idea that one generation occurs every 20 to 25 years, and that the human lifespan is 4 generations, and that history repeats on a cycle of every 4 generations. One generation creates the next, which creates the one again. It's a highly refined version of good men. A strong man make good times make weak men make bad times make strong men. It's very much more elaborate than that, but it's interesting. And we'll see. But they've got an updated version, so I'm very curious to know what. The second book is very repetitive. If you read the rest, the first, well, I got to tell you, it's like many of these books. It's a slog, and I think the reason that it's just so hard to get through this stuff is because it's just not in any kind of story form at all. It's just this constant repetition of the same facts again and again and again with a slightly different angle on it. And maybe you don't make a book out of it. Maybe it's just a brochure. I don't know, but it's still not. It's not a fun read. But it's an important read, and so I'll read that stuff so that you don't have to. Let's see what else. I think I pretty much covered on the world of entertainment with this, at least in terms of where things are currently. Still writing the Frank Luke script, and working like a fiend on basically 4 different things at the same time, and I can't really give one of them up. They've all got to kind of show some progress, so that's kind of where we are today. Natasha has had saved her money and developed a really good credit score. It started with like a starter credit card, and she just built that credit up. She bought herself a car, real nice little mini SUV, which she adores, and her life is completely different now. Now she gets to go wherever she wants to, and it's been 6 or 7 years. But she's just euphoric all the time. She just comes home just like, I went here, I went there, and I'll tell you, I got to know this town, Los Angeles, through the Thomas Guide. For those of you who ever lived in LA, you know what that was. A map book about this thick and about this wide. And you'd look up an address and it would tell you which page to go to, and you had to figure out how to get there. So I'm used to navigating this town, and I know these streets pretty well because I was a professional driver here for almost 4 years. However, I have to say that these some of these modern marvels are really modernly marvelous. The navigator she's got, we use Apple Maps, is phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. Not only does it tell you where you're going, it gives you. You'd be just driving along, and it'll say, go straight through this light, and at the next light, turn right. So there you go. We'll see. We'll see about a question I just saw there. Sorry, she's just having the time of her life, so that's just great. I think what I will do is I will go through the questions, and then we'll see if we get through those, and we usually do, and we'll check Facebook, and if we're through those, then maybe we'll take a couple of live on the air requests in real time. So we'll see. All right, here we go. Let's do this thing. Yeah, I think these animations that I showed are just, they're really coming along, and I think it's going to be groovy. So let me log into my own website. Would Vic Mignogna be a good cast for Frank Luke? Yes, Eric. No. Frank Luke was 19 or 20, I guess, when he was killed. Thin as a rail and has a face like a knife blade. And I don't know how good an actor Vic Mignogna is. I know how good an actor he is playing James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise, but I don't know how well that translates. I want to talk to Mignogna, not even so much about Star Trek Continues so much as just to just be one of these in deep in the weeds in terms of what Star Trek is, and on reflection, he'd be a better person to talk to about it than, certainly better than George Takei or Takei, or Shatner or anybody. That was just a job for them. But Vic Mignogna, what he accomplished is just, I think it's simply the greatest fan salute ever. So we'll see. Oh my, yeah. Well, if you're reduced to a catchphrase, there you go. I'm not a fan, frankly. I wasn't a fan before, it came out. I don't really much give a damn about any of that stuff, but I just remember watching the show and just thinking, there's something wrong with this guy. He's wearing more mascara than the women are, and I just don't know. Yeah, I could talk about the Axonar guy. I know Gary Graham rather well, so I can see if you would be interested in talk about that. He's a swell guy too. They're all great guys. And Bruce Boxleitner's another person I know and haven't seen in a long time, so that'd be great. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, that's quite a bit. We'll see how we do. But we will get through talking about Sulu again. Yeah, I was just talking about Sulu briefly. That character has been there it was present at the, present at the inception or the conception, depending how you want to look at it. And during the course of, what is it now, 50 years? He's been in a fair amount of episodes and movies and stuff. He's only had one line ever, that I thought was like a really great line, and that was in Undiscovered Country. We got to get there faster. The ship, shake the ship to pieces. Shake it to pieces. Then that was the only time I ever saw him. Doesn't he hold a teacup in one of those in the Undiscovered Country where you first see him and he's sitting in the captain's chair and he's holding a teacup with a saucer, God. And don't get me started on the musical thing again. Fly her apart then. Yeah, it was a great line. Actually got me like, yeah. Well, that was Sulu. All right, here we go. And Eric Blake, and thank you, Eric, for curating this on the member blog here. Okay, so here we go. Anyways, since we talked about JFK Space Vision before, I'm very curious what you feel about the ultimate value of the U.S. Space Force. Obviously, if we really plan on solidifying our endeavors on the moon, Mars, etc., we'll need some form of defense. Do you feel that's what Trump was going for and will ultimately achieve that? I think the main reason that they created the U.S. Space Force was because of inter-service rivalry. Had an unusual experience where we were, it was back when I was playing Star Citizen, and one of the players was an Air Force colonel, and he could not accept the naval terminology, just couldn't accept it. And he said, it wouldn't be Captain Kirk, it would be Colonel Kirk. I said, doesn't have the same ring to it, pal. And he was convinced that, that this would be Air Force property. And nobody really knows what the future is going to look like, but these things are ships. I don't know what the largest crew on an Air Force aircraft would be, but I'm thinking, well, if you count the controllers, it's probably on an AWAC, so you might have a crew of 10 or 15 maybe. They're airplanes. They're not ships. And then, the terms that are used in science fiction, destroyers, cruisers, all the rest of it, he just wouldn't have it. He would not have it. And I suspect that's probably a fair amount of what it is. I don't think, on some level, the Navy's always had their own. The Navy's always had their own Air Force, basically. And my understanding is that the largest and most powerful Air Force in the world is the United States Air Force, and the second largest and most powerful is the United States Navy. In any event, it's so clear in the pop culture that space exploration is a naval activity. Captain, Kirk, ensign, commander, these are all naval ranks. And I suspect that everybody bid hard for it. The Navy was actually the ones who were working on our first satellite, as a matter of fact, back during the Cold War. I actually don't get these confused. So Explorer and was it Pioneer? So they were trying to get this grapefruit-sized satellite into orbit, and the Navy was handling that, and then Sputnik happened, and then that was embarrassing, and then Sputnik 2 happened, which Sputnik 1 was a couple hundred pounds, Sputnik 2 was over 1,000 pounds, Explorer 1 I think was 6 pounds, and it kept blowing up. So von Braun stepped in and said, look, we basically have to have something in space now with Eisenhower. So von Braun built a rocket, by no means the most impressive of the model rockets he built prior to the war. And they stuck it on top of essentially I think it was on a Redstone, and it was essentially top of an A4 V2. And they finally got a satellite into space. And I forget what it was. I remember in the Apollo 11, what we saw, thing after the first year, it was communists 1,330 pounds, Americans 9 pounds or 20 or 30, something like that. So anyway, I think that's the main reason for the Space Force is it's got to have some jurisdiction somewhere. Now, the Space Force uses Air Force and Army ranks, is that correct? And Marine Corps too, is right. So there are generals in the Space Force. I think that's probably the way it's going to go. I got to tell you, I don't see the Space Force being a real big active participant. I don't see the Air Force giving up. I'm sure it's supposed to, but I don't see the Air Force giving up its space-based capabilities, just handing it over to these guys, It was Vanguard, it wasn't Pioneer. I don't know. I mean, we're gonna need something like it eventually, but it's hard to take the Space Force seriously at the moment because it's all uniforms and red tape, and there's no hardware. It's kind of hardware that makes it a force and not just a name. If the Space Force had owned hardware, then it'd be great. And if they were developing hardware, I'd be impressed. But to me, I'm not saying it was a public relations or anything like that stunt. I'm just saying that I suppose they're going to come into their own eventually, but the U.S. Air Force does not did not just spontaneously spring out from the forehead of Zeus like the Space Force did. The Army Air Corps had been there since beginning of aviation. Bart's Treasure says the early U.S. satellites where the rockets exploded were nicknamed Kaputnik and Stayputnik. That's great. Roadrunner says that the Air Force has already given up Cape Canaveral. Did they give it up to the Space Force, or did they just walk away from it? In any event, someone just mentioned, Sad Wings Raging just mentioned Admiral Musk. And it's going to be private enterprise until there's a collision with either another government or another company or our government. But I don't see there's going to be much need for a Space Force until they're armed and ready to shoot things. And that doesn't seem to be anywhere on the horizon that I'm aware of. So I guess that's that. Not that I'm opposed to it, What are they called, by the way? What is it? What is an enlisted man? What's the lowest rank of the Space Force called? Anybody remember or know? So not airmen, obviously. I don't think they're not spacemen. Private. Thank you, Steve. Guardian. Oh dear. Really? So it's Guardian first class. Honestly, is that kind of thing? Oh boy. Guardian. That's not a good start. That's not a good start. Yeah, I would call them. I'd call them something other than Guardian. Guardian Whittle, get over here now. Me? I'm a Guardian. I don't have to haul over there. Oh, that's just not good. I think they should have named him. Crusader would have been a cool name. Crusader Evans. Yes, sir. Sir, yes, sir. Get over here. Drop and give me 20. So anyway, who knows? Guardians. Okay. Who knows? Should have been Spaceman. Spaceman Spike. Okay, Guardian. Anyway, there we go. This is happening to sports teams too. I think I saw. I want to make sure I'm not hallucinating. I think I saw NFL football in Europe, and I think that one of the teams is called either the Balts or the Baltics. I think it's called the Baltics. The Fighting Baltics. Wow. El Vaquero 555 says, "Hi, Bill. Welcome from Bernardillo." I can't read this. Bernalillo? Looks like it's Bernardillo. Bernalillo County, New Mexico. Yes, I was one of the ones open carrying yesterday and will be tomorrow. Good. The thing I like most about open carry is how it tends to lower the it de-escalates situations rapidly. Armed society is a polite society. You're gonna not say things to somebody who's got a pistol on their hip that you might say to them if they didn't, and I think that's just kind of good. Yeah, it's I guess at this point, since I don't really have anything else to add, we might as well just get into a little bit of the politics, because we certainly get into some of the show business on the other show. But and I can make a case for this being something certainly in the colonies, and maybe even in Major Mays Manley. So before I get to that aspect of the open carry thing, when I was looking at the proposal for Project Horizon, the Army proposal in 1959, I think, for a operational military base on the moon by 1966, Project Horizon. And one of the things that they talked about was defending the base. They weren't joking around. Those were serious guys back then. They were not fooling around. They were saying we got to get on the moon before the Russians do, and because when you're on the moon, you can just lob nuclear weapons down onto Earth, and I'm sure they thought we put a big old telescope up there and spy on people, all the rest of it. But they weren't fooling around. They were talking about how they were going to put in base defenses. Essentially, this is my interpretation. I think they were like they planned to have like a series of claymore mines around this thing. Just remote control kind of click. This side toward enemy. And I thought, you know what? By God, I'm keeping that. I'm going to keep that in the Major Mace Mattingly thing. I'm just going to have like as one of the checklists or something. Planetary base defenses. To safe, set to safe. Yeah, the Claymore necklace around our crater is deactivated. Yeah. Front towards enemy. It's a handy piece. You can make a pretty compelling case that is the most useful set of instructions that's ever been committed to paper or plastic in this case. I can't think of anything right off the bat that's more effective use of 3 words than front towards enemy. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to have a good time. Oh, come on now. Hang on. I just want to make sure. Don't panic, Bill. Don't panic. Okay, thank God. I thought for a minute I didn't record that, but I realized now I'm only recording on one, and I was looking at the other. So base defenses. Anyway, back to the open carry thing. There's something. One of the things that I want to do with this Major Mace Mattingly thing, which again, I can't stress this enough. This is not displacing the colonies. It's just it's a 1/72nd scale test run. In terms of viability and getting it done, it's infinitely more simple. But Red Runner wants to know, does gunpowder burn in space? It does, because gunpowder contains its own oxidant. That's why it will work underwater. Anyway, I kind of like the idea. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to be working hard on the Mace Mattingly thing, because the more I think about it, the more interesting it gets. These guys, and Mace is going to be the driving force on this, but they're going to continue to do things by the book, because if they don't, they'll either go insane or they'll start to get sloppy, which is why they never got the widescreen TVs. They could have gotten something up there. They just said, if we get the widescreen TVs, we're just going to watch widescreen TV. I was listening to Mike Rowe on an interview the other day, and he said that a lot of men who were formerly fully employed are now unemployed, and many of them are looking for work, but he said when they don't find work, you know what they're turning to? And the interviewer said no. He said they're turning to screens, to devices. He says they're spending 40 hours a week looking at YouTube and whatever else is out there. It's a full-time job. So they're not going to fall into that, because if they do, they're just going to get, fat, lazy, and stupid. This is something this is going to cause some trouble, but somebody has to do this, and I might as well be me. Somebody's got to do the dirty work about this. Does anybody here realize, or did you realize prior to me saying this, if you ever watched Space 1999 or 2001: A Space Odyssey, that when they get inside a building, gravity's back to normal? There's no artificial gravity. It's just once you're inside, gravity's back to normal. Once you go outside, you have to move like this because you're in space and everything's very slow. No, it's 1/6 gravity inside the station. So they're going to have to be exercising like crazy. I'll get to the guns again. As a just as sort of an operational thing, I'm trying to find clothes for the guys. The clothes that they're in now are just MetaHuman t-shirt and pants. That's not what I want. There's a pretty decent flight suit online. It's expensive, It's like $200, and it's a lot of money for a rigged flight suit. Now there are pilot suits that are much more complicated than just a flight suit. And I thought about them seriously, and I'm thinking, well, what is all this extra stuff for? And I realized, oh, it's there to be heavy. Mesa's got everybody wearing, 70, 80 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever, of additional stuff just so that their legs don't atrophy. But they're going to be on the damn treadmill all the time. And one nice thing about being on the moon is you can lift 6 times, the amount of weight. So the gym scenes will be kind of fun, Watch old Grim go in there and bench press 2,400 pounds. I think that'll actually be really pretty epic when you think about it. You get this either side of the bar. You just got just huge, just hunk of iron. I think that's actually very hilarious. I'm liking Grim more and more. I think about him. I don't know. One of the things I also had to deal with is this is this is the part that I really got there for, and that's the political commentary, and it's kind of like, why are you guys still there? You've been there for 50 years, 55 years. Why are you still there? And they said, because we volunteered for this mission, and the mission isn't over. We have a duty to remain here. And that, I don't think you'll say this out loud, but that's what keeps them going, is the duty. Without the duty, they're going to go completely nuts. He's just, I just really like it. It's like, what do you want us to do? If we cry and complain about it and stamp our feet, is that going to change anything? No. Somebody's got to be here to maintain the space. We put a lot of time and effort and money into this. It costs some lives. And we're here. We volunteered. We thought we'd be here for 2 or 3 years. We've been here for 55. But it doesn't change the fact that we signed on the dotted line. This is our duty. We have a duty to be here. That's going to sound alien to modern ears, especially the part about not crying about it. I just find that to be, really fascinating. And I like the idea that everything is just continually done by the book, because otherwise I think they'd just go barking mad. You may have noticed from that animation that the inside of the command center looked like, there was wall paneling, there was a nice white roof with little spotlights, little practically track lights. There's going to be a flag on the wall. Everybody's apartment's going to be different. They're going to have different furniture. They're going to have different stuff on the walls. It's going to be like they actually lived there. When I go looking for these assets on either in Unreal Engine or in TurboSquid or CG Trader, everything in the future now, everything is nothing but metal with all of these little doodads on it, just plain metal. And I'm looking at these things, and some of them I just go batshit insane, pardon language, just walking from one end of the hall to the other. It's so unimaginative, all this, well, it's prefabricated housing. Okay, it's prefabricated housing. With you on that. Got that. Fair enough. You're in outer space, and you're first people there, so you're just dropping down a container for a cabin. You get the idea. But that doesn't mean that the container, if you're living in a shipping container, have you seen what these shipping container houses? Some of them are really quite remarkable. But whether you think they're remarkable or not, the fact is that when somebody decides we're going to live in a shipping container, the conversions that they do are just, some of them are just stunning. And it's like, my God, it's like somebody actually lives in this steel box. But these lazy, no good for nothing bums out there. I've just got people roaming around. All the video games, all of them. The future always looks like it's that Blade Runner aliens kind of metal, steam, dark. I mean, I thought it was cool when I first saw it too, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is hell. Who wants to live in this place? Nobody. So I really like the idea. I damn near put a couch on the front of that window there, as a matter of fact. I resisted that temptation. But their rooms are going to be really cool. And I had to do, when I mentioned I had to change the design of the base around a lot. Once I had to start taking it seriously on the inside. And I took a look. I just put a guy in there inside one of these hab modules to scale. And I just realized this is too much room. These guys would not be comfortable with this much room. So then I thought, okay, but they're not going to, hey, Jaeger, 1726, finally got to catch you live. Got to catch you live too. First time for everything. So Steve Whoop says interior design Sulu. Yeah, that's what we should call Sulu for. Lieutenant Sulu, what color do you think works better here than do you like the mauve, or do you think we should go with more of a earthy toned kind of a camel hair? Now he's in his wheelhouse. But that whole thing to me adds to the realism. So anyway, I looked at the hab module and I looked at how much space there is, and I said, this is too much space. One of the reasons I was playing around with the design was I figured these guys are a skeleton crew. Each one of them had their own entire module, and it just looked ridiculous. So I said, okay. Then I thought, they're not going to bunk together. That's just weird, So what I did was I took this hab module and I split it down the middle, and then so the door comes in, and then there's kind of like a little bit of an open area. So it's half a unit, which is the toilet, half a unit, which is the toilet. Entrance here, living rooms, bathroom with shower, both go to the window, so they both get a look outside the window. But they don't get to look next door. Everybody gets half a window. And the fun thing will be going from one room, hey, knock, 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 to the next room. These guys are going to design it. They're going to have their own furniture. And somebody say, they sent up, this kind of, beanbag chairs and stuff. Yeah, they sent up whatever we asked for. They figured it's cheaper to send up a nice couch than it is for us to, lose our minds and blow the base up. So yeah, that's right. They figured this was a top priority. That's that. I'm still playing with the mechanics of this. I love the Jitlov field, the fact that this magnetic shielding that they put up there to protect the base is so intensive that it causes biology to slow down. And I love them getting into like these little transparent cylinders, and just Will Robinson kind of thing. However, I'm trying to figure out what the crew rotation would be. And I guess it answered itself just right now. The crew rotation is, if I want two guys or one guy to be in the cylinder, then that's where they'll be. And if I need all of them out on the surface, then that's where they'll be. All I have to do is show each one of them in the it's not even cryo, in the chambers in suspended animation. As long as I show that, then people can figure it out. But if you were actually living on the base, it would be rare. It wouldn't be rare. I don't know. Maybe 4 hours of every day, all four of them are awake, and they just kind of stagger their sleep schedules or something like that. CP Tome says a Marine would build a big damn foxhole-looking thing, cover it with a flattened-out piece of supply rocket body, and then bury it, seal it up with a foamed melted regolith. Yeah, I thought you were gonna describe them building some kind of bungee pit. Was it bungee? Not bungee. Bungee pit. Punji sticks. Little stretch out a little sheet there, kind of hammer it down, and spikes, and then just cover some moon dirt on there. Get some of those those styrofoam moon rocks that they're in such heavy supply down here on Earth for the fake moon landings. Set those up and just let the guys walk into it, and then very, very, very slowly fall onto these spikes. I don't know if as a slur, I don't know if I like hair force or chair force better. I think I'm going to go with chair force. So they definitely need their privacy. So that's that. Anyway, all of this coming off of the open carry thing, and I'm thinking when they go out on a mission, just say they're just going to drive someplace in the buggy. I think they strap on a heater. I think they just plain wear a pistol. You're on the moon. Chance of you getting mugged is pretty low. Yeah, but it's not zero. So, so we're just carrying because with the exception of Gordo, we're military guys and we feel a little more comfortable when we're out there doing our job, having a little backup. So, there you go. All right, moving on with the questions here. Tim Morrow, great name. I know you've often bemoaned the current state of popular culture. I often bemoan pretty much everything, and its steady subversion by leftists. Heck, we all have. But I had a thought. There are plenty of people out there writing and/or producing other work that, if not actively anti-woke, then at least non-woke, and made by people who'd either be sympathetic to conservative viewpoints or at least not actively hostile, or at the very least looking for an audience that could give you a platform. How about it? Also, have a look at Iron Age media. There are even plenty of YouTubers that branched out into writing books. Shadiversity and Drinker come to mind. Just my 2 cents adjusted for inflation. All right, let's have a quick look at Iron Age media here. A lot of graphic novels. It's great. It's like a YouTube for books. Excuse me. That looks really groovy. And colorful. For me, the writing is always the toughest part. And once it's written, then, you can do anything you want with it. You can hand it over to somebody who knows what they're doing, turn it into a graphic novel. Or what I don't have is the time to just sit there and do what I would really like to do, honestly. I mean, if I really, really was independently wealthy and had my druthers, I would do nothing but sit down and develop this stuff. Just put all this stuff on paper and start developing it. But we have other obligations as well, so there you go. Great question here from Chris Taylor. Are you going to edit the approximately 2.5-second round-trip radio delay out of the Horizon Cruise interviews? Yes. And I'm going to look it up, but I'm going to use the exact same terminology that they used in 2001. They do the interview with Dave and Frank, and just before it starts, the interviewer says, and we have edited out the 8-minute delays between answer for your viewing convenience. So I'll make it clear that, yeah. Now, when they're talking to Capcom, that kind of thing, and there still will be a Capcom. I think I mentioned I want to have like this sort of mini mission control, and it's in Cheyenne Mountain. It's in a remote corner of Cheyenne Mountain, and there's just one guy in his late 80s or mid 80s who goes in there once every week and fires up a couple of the consoles just to talk to the guys and put in their orders and, see what they need. And, the supply ships become less and less frequent and all the rest of it. So, but then when they're talking, there will be that 1 second delay, 1.5 seconds. And by the way, I was thinking about this when I think you might have mentioned it earlier. The communications with Apollo from Mission Control, I guess maybe I just didn't notice the delay because what they were saying was just so important. So they weren't, that's right. It wasn't so much a conversation as it was just, I'm going to make a statement, and here comes another statement, and so on and so forth. So there you go. So I'll definitely do that. Anyway, he goes on, by the way, I recently learned that twice the only doctors in Antarctica got appendicitis over the winter. one had to operate on himself. So now the doctors wintering there have appendectomies before going. For rough and tumble, bunch playing lunar football and other strenuous activities, the lack of a doctor or medic is noticeable. Are any of them cross-trained, or one of the Soviet ladies is an MD? Well, we're not going to be counting on the Soviets or the Soviet ladies. They certainly didn't know there were going to be Soviets, let alone Soviet ladies up there when they did the launch. I think I'm going to give. I think this would be Gordo's area of expertise. And I like the idea, which has just come to me, that they've got a videotape, like on reel-to-reel 1-inch videotape, that basically shows them how to do any conceivable operation, set a broken bone or compound fracture, how to pull a tooth, how to perform an appendectomy. It's an interesting idea. If somebody gets hurt in a way that they haven't gotten hurt before, then, I got to watch this tape here. Kind of, okay, pause. Okay, I did that right. Now pause again. Okay, just back it up 5 seconds. Sad Wings Raising says, I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. More likely I'm a bricklayer, not a doctor. So I think all of them would be medically trained, not to a very high level, but certainly capable of, taking care of themselves or any other kind of, expected on the job injury. If somebody gets a finger cut off, they'd probably figure out how to, pack it in ice. And then as far as attaching it goes, I'm going to go with Gordo on the technique. And I'm actually thinking, as I was thinking about this in real time, I was actually thinking that it would probably be Grimm that did the operation. Gordo would be supervising it, but I think Grimm would probably do it because I think he by far has the best physical dexterity. All he does is build things, with his hands, and when he's off duty, he's just working with his, he's got the jeweler's loop, and he's working on little machines and cutting gears and doing all kinds of things like that. So, but that is a question I had considered, and I don't want to make any of them MDs, although you could make a case that one of them should be. I think really basically the argument is that they thought that they would be up there. Oh, God. I haven't set an internal date for when they actually abandoned the base and left the 4-guy skeleton crew up there. I was thinking the day after the 1976 election might be kind of appropriate. But, they had to work with what they had to work with. Oh, I found something. This, again, will mean a great deal to a small number of people. Let me find it. And once again, I'm going to have to pop it into both things. So I'm a model building guy. I've recently seen some DCS videos with the F4s in Vietnam colors, and I remember thinking, the F4, what a hunk of junk. Not a hunk of junk. It's just the smoking Thunderhawk, right? I probably have built 30 F4 Phantoms in the course of my life. I think 30 seems about right. And painted almost all of them in Vietnam colors. So I thought, okay. And then I saw a Growling Sidewinder long shot video with these two guys are in F4s, and watching the F4s in the air just nearly made me cry. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. It just looks so good. I have no, so I get lost so easily. I can't keep track of myself. But I built a lot of models as a kid, and one of the models I built, and then I ended up ordering it from eBay 15 years ago for the parts for kit bashing. One of the models I built is of this guy right here, and it's going to take a few moments for me to drop it into both streams. So Make sure I got the right one. Yep. So here it goes into YouTube. Just pop that out. This is a plastic model that was kind of popular when I was a kid, and it's called the Pilgrim Explorer. It originally comes with a fairing. Here it is. I think this shows it in both configurations. Yeah, it does. It's one of the coolest models ever. Those paddles rotated out. It was really well designed, well thought out. And let me see if this is a little better quality here. No, it doesn't work. And so I was talking about, you know, some of the rockets that we need to design for this Project Horizon, you know, documentary. And so that's it with the deployed thing. This is what it looked like in launch and in cruise. So it basically goes up on one big honking rocket. It's like the third stage of a Nova, a Saturn V or a Nova. Hang on while I drop it into both of these things again. So it's just really cool. And hold that thought. Yeah. Hang on. So I thought, okay, this whole thing is basically about having fun, you know, having fun with nostalgia, having fun with the whole 60s thing. So that's it in the two configurations, the launch configuration, cruise configuration. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? And because I'd like to bring it back. I really love this idea that that some of the things that we had as toys are leaked. They just leaked from the actual, you know, Project Horizon stuff. So, so what I'm going to do with this Pilgrim Explorer is, because I built a bunch of those. I just loved it. It was just maybe the best model I ever built. Ever. It was just fantastically well thought out. Had all kinds of cool things on it. And when the paddles are out, it spins for artificial gravity. Now there's a problem with this, and that is that this is why the Aurora, I had the hab modules going way out on cables. The problem with the Pilgrim Explorer is the top floor of those paddles are so close to the center that it's essentially weightless. And then as you get lower and lower and lower, one floor down, you get further away from the spin rotation. That means the centrifugal effect is increasing. So the further away you get, the more gravity you feel. But unfortunately, I did a little bit of the math, and to get to 1G, 1 Earth gravity, to get these guys back home, prep them for the trip back home, would take, I don't know what the RPMs are, but it's crazy high. It's really high. In the course of doing this, I discovered that that experiments have been done, and that human beings can tolerate looking out the window at a worldview that's rotating at 2 RPM. But anything above 2, and once you get above 3, you start to get sick. Just dizzy. Now, the idea was that this thing could get from the Earth to the Moon very quickly, but they had one of these things. It was like a transfer vehicle. And the idea was they would take a crew out to the Moon, they'd get them up at 1G, and then they'd move them closer to the center. And as you get closer to the center, you get lower and lower weight. And so they get them down to about 1.6G, ready for the Moon. They get down on the Moon. And then on the way back, they'd have to spend some time. This thing would stay in lunar orbit. It'd be like the lunar orbital station. It's just it can move. So basically, it'd be like a rotating space station in orbit around the Moon, and this would be where they had hospitals and things like that, and that it was, when you would take a crew back, you'd start them off at 1.6G, and then you just kind of move them out or increase the spin and they'd get their, be like a decompression thing on a dive. Forget about the RPMs for right now. It's just interesting. However, it's like this thing is huge. Yeah, and Bart's Treasures mentions the Coriolis gradient. What that basically means in short is, since you've got such a short radius, your head is significantly closer to the zero G center than your feet are. So your body actually, the weight of your head and the weight of your feet are not what you're used to. We'll solve that problem later by ignoring it. So you got this. Essentially, it's a movable space station. This Pilgrim Explorer thing. I just think it's just the best design. So this thing goes up on the top of like a Sea Dragon in one piece. It just goes. It just launches this thing in one shot. Gets into orbit, poofs off the fairings, out go the paddles. When the thing is under acceleration, the paddles fold back so that the gravity is always down. That's one of the reasons why this design is so good. When the paddles are down and you're accelerating, gravity is coming, the sense of pseudo-gravity is coming from the acceleration, and then when you stop your burn, they go back out again. So this is designed to take a slow waltz back and forth between the moon and the Earth. It's essentially a mobile space station. And then somewhere around, I don't know, I haven't got the date yet, somewhere around the late 70s or 80s, somewhere in there, Dave Big Booty says, so the centrifuge and Discovery would have made the astronaut 6? Yeah, I think it would have, yeah. There's not enough radius. But again, now we're at the point where now you're just spoiling the fun. Back to the Pilgrim Explorer. So this gigantic thing's been going back and forth and taking the crews to the moon. And when they finally abandon the base and just leave the 4 guys there, they take the Pilgrim Explorer. And then when this thing comes up in the history of Project Horizon, the question is, so what happened to this thing? Well, they had to shake it once it got to be so big that there was no way to hide it anymore. You know, it just no way to hide it. So, you know, radars were getting better, and so they just couldn't do it anymore. So then the question is, so did they just burn it up into the atmosphere, or did they just shoot it into the sun? No. It was a perfectly good operational spacecraft. Cost a ton of money, and a lot of work. So where is it? Are there people aboard it? Yes, it's fully crewed. Well, where is it? Well, I'm not at liberty to tell you that. It just went out. Where did it go? We're not sure yet. But it's big enough so that they could have basically done a grand tour of the entire solar system. It's got a nuclear rocket on the back. You know, if they were careful with their fuel, they probably did the whole thing. We're going to find settlements on, you know, Enceladus, and you know, there's going to be like a little dome on this geodesic dome on the surface of Titan, and you know, and this thing had a crew of 40 or something like that, and they just did the whole solar system and just dropped guys off and said, make it work somehow, you know. But that's for season 4 or something like that. I just love it. Eric Blake says, somehow I can't believe Reagan would keep the 4 guys abandoned. I'd like to think he'd talk with them on occasion. It's a fun idea having him talk with them. And it's also a good idea. Reagan never let him down. They started getting in real trouble with the Clinton administration. And the fun thing about that is, you said it'd be fun to have Reagan talk to him. With a little bit of creative work, you can have, if you can find footage of Reagan talking to a camera like in an interview or something, then you certainly can take the Reagan interview as it exists, chop it up, and set up questions so that he sounds like he's not, or set up a conversation so that he sounds like he's having a conversation, and that could show up on the screens on the base, and the fun continues, you know. So it's just great. So yeah, so it's out there. This gigantic, huge thing is out there. I love it. Because we could have done it. And but I want to go to Europa, says Steve. Captain says, you better just stop fighting down there. I'm going to turn this Pilgrim Explorer around, and we're going back to Earth right now. deep fake the voice, and I could also deep fake the face too. So we'll figure out a way to do that. Yeah, was that David Boutte says for the moon races, use the footage of Reagan starting the Daytona 500 from 1984 to be Air Force One. Gentlemen, start your engines. I love it. I love it. And when Grim gets one of the things I put on the space station model animation that you saw is I put essentially a workshop garage out there with a big ramp. So that's where Grim works on his vehicles. I gave some thought to how the space would be assembled, which is a real problem because I don't want cranes and stuff there. I'm thinking, man, how did these guys build this thing? Well, a young engineer named Bert Rutan figured out how to do it out of fiberglass and foam, so that's the actual structure. And he put some lining on the inside. That's why they need the electrical field, electromagnetic shielding. But how did they actually get things into position? And then I thought, this is a job for the flying bedspread, the flying bedstead. Check this out. When they were trying to figure out a way to train astronauts how to land on the moon, which had not been done before, NASA built this bad boy right here, which the pilots named the flying bedstead because it is essentially looks like a flat iron bed, wrought iron bed. You drop that into both windows there. Now Neil Armstrong said that that without this device, which came as close to killing him as anything could without actually killing him, Armstrong said that without this, that the moon landings would not have been possible. That he learned so much flying that thing. And I thought, okay, well, take out the jet engine, put in a rocket engine, and then from where the four legs are, have four cables. Leave the cockpit open, and then fly this thing down from orbit in an open cockpit. And I just thought, I love it. I love it. I think it's just great. You got your space on. Yeah, that's all you need, man. Just get out there and fly this thing down. And so I thought, well, okay, you got this big old module, and this gigantic thing in orbit, and there's this giant module, like let's say the HAB module or something, and they hook up cables. I'm trying to figure out how this would work. It'd be really hairy, but that would require a good pilot. Turns out we had some of those. So if this thing had enough juice, this flying bedstead thing had enough juice, and you had four cables, significant length, not crazy long, but significant length. Dave Big Booty says, how did that thing get off the ground carrying Neil Armstrong and his balls? Exactly. He ejected from that thing. If it had been half a second later, he would have been killed. Once the thing goes over, that's it. Good night. So it's just visually interesting. So if you imagine like one of these HAB modules in orbit around the moon, and then somebody like Doug just getting in his yellow suit and just doing an EVA out there, just opens the hatch and just EVAs himself out there, gets in that chair, clips a little safety line on, puts himself in these completely weightless, straps in, got cables that are already hooked up to this HAB module. So everything is just basically just floating in space. I think I've got this right. If he gets the, we'll call it the lander. Let's not call it the lander. Let's call it the bug. Okay, this flying bedstead thing. So they're in orbit, and no matter where they are and when they start, when they're getting ready to start their business, the bug has to be up orbit of the module. Module has to be further along the flight path than the bug. Okay? So now you got this bug, set the angle, you just a little bit of thrust, and as this thing starts to thrust, then the cables are going to eventually reach tension. And what it's going to look like is, it's going to look like he's towing the thing away, but what he's actually doing is he's retrofiring. So he's letting the mass of this module and the mass of the bug go essentially like a stable deal. And then over time, he has to do the pitch over maneuver, where he lets the lunar gravity just kind of take this thing down, and it's all done by hand. And I just thought, man, this is just great. Hey, see you later, Sidewings, if you haven't already gone. If you haven't, you'll probably miss this message. I thought, this is the spirit that I'm really trying to capture, right? This is exactly what I'm trying to capture, 100%. How do you do this? Well, why don't we try this? We already got the thing built, All we need to swap out the jet engine for a rocket engine, put a lot more fuel on there, and then just land it. Well, what about positioning this thing? You got to position these things to within, a couple feet or less, a couple inches really, to get these things to bolt together. You got 10 guys on the ground. You got a good pilot who knows what he's doing. He's talking to him. He said, come 2 feet to the left. Yep, good. A little bit forward. Okay, and then the guys from that point, they can push it into shape, push it into position. Okay, now down. Bolt her in, boys. Just epic. It's epic. And 1202. Give me an update on that 1202. The idea of a guy in an open frame LEM, just wearing a spacesuit, hand flying. He's got the same kind of computer that the Apollo guys had. Hand flying this thing down to the surface, and then basically just looking over the side like this, just like some of these really great helicopter pilots. And I don't think this would be Doug. Actually, I think these guys would be actual trained helicopter type pilots. Maybe Doug, who knows? So they just kind of like, a little more to the left. That's good. The only thing I was thinking about is the rocket exhaust hitting this module thing. You put a little deflector there or something. Who knows? But that's what Major Mace Mattingly is all about. It's like, got a problem? Yeah. Well, what do we have technology-wise? Well, we got this. Well, then, all right. We're going to have to find a way to do it. I just adore it. I just love it. I think I mentioned Hayes Griard earlier in this episode, but he did an animation about something that was a real deal, a proposal anyway. They would take a ballistic missile sub, put a huge rocket on the back of it, huge rocket. It sticks out of the top of the sub, so it's creating a lot of drag. So you just take this thing out there, underwater, stealthy, get to where you want. Then this thing launches, just like a Triton or a Poseidon. It's in its own little compressed air bubble. Thing goes into orbit. It's got a nose cone. And then this thing was designed so that the pilot would just stick his head out the window. And he'd fly this thing to this Soviet satellite, spy satellite. And honest to God, this is what the plan was. He'd just get this thing close to it, and then just with a hammer, he'd just go bang, 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 beat the crap out of it, smash the lens, and then retrofire this thing, fly this thing down through the atmosphere to a reentry. Out comes a para wing, and just flares this thing in the desert and just puts down the skids and mission accomplished, That's just fantastic. I just love it. Because that's back when we had brains and guts. And to me, that's everything. All right, what are we doing here, Tom? Questions. I remember we're doing questions here somewhere. Ian Nolan. Bill, Rogue One did something incredible. It had a final scene and then didn't end. It took a good moment for us as viewers to understand what it was even showing before it went into its real final scene. Can you think of any other films that broke narrative convention as successfully? What are the conditions? What even are the conditions that this can happen? So if I remember correctly, Rogue One ends when they use the Death Star with one beam instead of all 5 or 6 or whatever, which is essentially something that's low enough power to not crack the planet, but high enough power to basically take the crust off of an area, the size of Texas or something. And they've done it. They've got the information away, and then this beam comes down, and then just this entire landscape. You're just looking at it. It's just rising. It's terrific. Rogue One, by far my favorite Star Wars movie. Well, certainly at least of the post original trilogy, and maybe ever. And so these people are just looking at each other, and you just realize this thing is coming, and you're not going to get in the Falcon and outrun this thing. This is it. It's over. You went on this mission, and it's going to cost you your life. And so there's that, and then the final ending is when they did they recreated the blockade runner, and they hand a de-aged or CG Princess Leia the chip. What is this? Oh, it's hope. So it's basically closes the circle for the original Star Wars movie. I thought it was great. And so you're right, it has 2 endings. And unlike Lord of the Rings has 9 endings. I don't actually never counted them, but I do know even when I was watching it live the first time, I loved it so much. And really surprised me because I'd never been into fantasy before. I went to the first one reluctantly, but at the end of it, the Return of the King ends 5 different times, but it doesn't reverse itself the way this does. Rogue One ends on a sense of, dismay and despair. These people you've been following around this whole time, they're all dead. You don't actually see them die, but you realize the horror of it. The whole planet's crust is being stripped off. So it's kind of a downer ending, and then they give you this kind of, little bonbon on the way out the door, which is like, well, yes, these people died, but they saved, hundreds of billions of people if this Death Star had continued going around operational and all the rest of it. So I'm trying to think of an example of that, and nothing comes to mind right now, Ian. But the bottom line is, whether anything comes to mind or whether I can think of any other examples, it was just beautifully done. It's just well written. Just really, really well written, and that's really all it takes. It takes somebody. It takes somebody who's not afraid to pull the trigger on beloved characters, and you can do that and have a downer ending. But I don't think nobody likes those. Nobody likes seeing a movie where the person you're rooting for dies. So if you're really looking at it as a writer. As a good writer, you can say, all right, I've just spent 90 minutes getting people invested in these characters so that they genuinely care about what happens to them. And now I'm going to kill them. If you're going to kill them, it had better be for a damn good reason, which is why Steve Whoop and Twitch beat me to it, which is why of all of the death scenes in the history of the movies, the most pathetic one of all is Han Solo getting killed in, what is it? Is it The Last Jedi where that happens? No, it's Force Awakens. That is without doubt the biggest F you in the face of an audience I've ever seen in my life. And it's so bad that it amazes me that I can't credit it with stupidity, frankly. There's too many people involved for it to be an accident. C.P. Tomes, our friend C.P. Tomes said, it's a worthless death. Yes, it's pointless. It does nothing. He's an iconic character. He's not a fringe. It's not like Wedge Antilles or somebody. This is the guy, and he gets killed just so this pitiful, pathetic writer can show you how mean his pseudo-villain, crybaby Kylo Ren is. That's the reason he does it. He does it to show, look, Kylo Ren is so evil. He killed Han Solo. Killed his own father, same guy. Oh, he's a bad guy. Well, I don't believe it. He doesn't strike me as a terrifying guy. It strikes me as a guy you don't want to piss off, but he doesn't instill fear in me the way that freaking Darth Vader did. So it was pointless. Pointless. Han Solo has to die. If he's going to die, Han Solo has to die flying the Millennium Falcon into whatever is going to destroy all of his friends and a lot of other people too. In fact, I'm reluctant to even talk about that final trilogy in any other sense. It's best just to scorn it. But really, if you're going to kill Han Solo in the trilogy that they produced, the so-called third trilogy, then it's Han Solo who takes the Falcon and engages the hyperdrive and destroys the enemy fleet. That's how Han Solo needs to go. Right? That's how he goes. And if you're going to do it right, you've got to have this fleet not chasing. This fleet's not is just writing on the fly. But since you asked, it's not like this. It's not like this frickin' armada with this dreadnought or whatever is chasing down the rebels because there's 100 people there. No, this thing is coming to destroy something precious. It's coming to do something really, 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 really bad. And that probably means destroy the headquarters of the rebellion, not just a freighter, end up with 12 guys. I mean, this is it. They found the home base of the rebellion where kids are playing out in the sunshine, and everybody's actually living a life free of the Empire. And they finally found this place and they're bringing this thing in there to kill it. And there's no way to stop it. And they launch all these X-Wings and the X-Wings just get slaughtered, annihilated because they brought in so many TIE fighters and everybody is there and there's no way to get off this planet. And it's like Han basically is running for the Falcon and everybody is again thinking, okay, here he goes. He's going to run again. And he says something like, Luke, Leia, come with me. We can't leave. Just come here. Gets him over there at the ramp. The three of them there. He says, I got something I got to do. It's been great working with you. And he shakes Luke's hand and he gives Leia a hug and he goes up the ramp and he closes the door and the Falcon goes up and Chewie's there. And Chewie is like screaming and yelling because he got, Chewie, I want you to go out and untie the thing or do something like that. Chewie goes down the ramp and closes the door. Now Chewie's angry. Han Solo takes off and he gets this thing lined up. I think the whole hyperdrive thing into a vehicle was just garbage and caused a lot of problems. But if you're going to do that, then that's how Han Solo goes out. That's how he goes out. He goes out with his hand on the hyperdrive thing, and maybe he pulls out a little picture of Leia or something, or the three of them together the four of them together would be even better. A little picture he's got of Luke, Leia, himself, and Chewie at the celebration at the end of the Death Star thing. He looks at this picture, he closes his eyes, he shoves that thing into overdrive, and then he saves the world. All of this fleet disintegrates. And then all of these pieces start to enter the atmosphere down on the ground, and it's just nothing but this incredible kind of fireworks display. That's how Han Solo needs to go out. Not stabbed in by some emo dork in the middle of nowhere and fall into a pit. It's just, and what happened to him after that, Did they just call some droids just to sweep him up? Is that what happened? Did they just get a mop or something? Is that what happened to Han Solo? Pathetic. It's so freaking unbelievably bad writing, and it's not even bad writing. It's just bad work from everybody, from the writer all the way to the top of the studio and the top of Disney. It's just plain awful. J.J. Abrams is a hack. He's just a hack. All he knows how to do is remake movies. He remade The Force Awakens is a remake of A New Hope. The first Star Trek movie is a remake of a Star Trek. The second Star Trek movie is a word-for-word remake of Wrath of Khan. He's a hack. He's a no talent hack, and he has got an entire freaking brood of disciples that are also hacks. And Kurtzman is one who's taken Star Trek where no series has gone before. All the rest of it, they're just terrible. CP Tome says, but the lens flares, So you look at that new Enterprise, it's like there's parts I like the kind of the blue in the nacelles and stuff, but it looks that the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise just looks too. It looks too designed. No, we can't go back to Rogue One. I'm not going back to Rogue One. I'm talking about what I'm talking about, Eric. And just too curvy, and then and what the hell was? Oh, the bridge. So it's all bright and everything. I like the bright, but does it look like anybody ever lived there? Could you stand to be on that bridge where everything is blindingly white, just white and blue and just? Can somebody turn the lights down just a little bit? I can't see my console here. It's sterile, is what it is. Sterile, and it's just plain. It's just plain awful. He's just a lizard. Okay, moving on. G.K. Masterson. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to speed this up. Hey, Bill. Heard about the interview show and love the idea of doing a bucket full of archetypes. I've decided, by the way, I've come to a name that I've settled on, and I'm just not going to give it any more thought because once it's settled on, I'm just settled on it. I'm going to call the show Decoding the Archetypes. And that's what it's going to be called. Have you considered checking out the 16 Myers-Briggs personality types to help with organizing them into cleaner categories? I use the MBTI types in my writing to get a lot inside my characters' heads. Could be useful. By the way, driving is fun. Backing is still a PITA, especially at places with weird docks or lights, etc., or tight lots, or so on. From GK, who became a professional truck driver, and congratulations to you. That's exactly great. The Myers-Briggs thing is, here's the thing about the archetypes. I don't think I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself here. It's not like I'm inventing characters. These archetypes are archetypes because they've been done the same way so many times. And some of the classic ones are very broad, like the hero. Okay, well, that's any number of things. Every man is one. But for example, the whiz kid. So Will Robinson's a whiz kid. He's also a golden boy, which is not necessarily the same thing. And so I don't need to understand that character because the character is so simple that it becomes an archetype. I'm not it's a fine idea, but unlike you, I'm not inventing new characters here, so I don't have to basically assemble the pieces. What I'm really doing is looking at characters who are so well assembled that the pieces are interesting. It's taking them apart, not putting them together so much. And I've obviously heard of Myers-Briggs and Myers-Briggs, and I've known a number of people who really swear by it. I've not found it to really hold my interest for whatever reason. I'm not saying there's nothing to it. I'm just saying, I don't know. It just seems a little, I don't know, either clinical or whatever. It just never really caught my attention. Although I do understand what they're doing, and I've heard from a number of people it's extremely accurate. But as I said, I'm not going to be creating characters as so much as trying to break them down. And I know you could say you could break them down using the Myers-Briggs things, but since I'm unfamiliar with it, it doesn't really get me anything, to be honest with you, GK. But thanks for the question, and And I'm glad to hear about the driving. Roadrunner says, my Myers-Briggs said I was a lawful chaotic. It's strange because when you brought that up, I realized now I never a big D&D player. In fact, I probably played it twice, but that matrix is kind of interesting. What is it? Lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good. I know there's like lawful. I forget what they are, but that actually kind of made sense to me. But I'm really going with the variations on the classical theme. You know, like off the top of my head, the class clown is an archetype. The bitter divorcee is an archetype. Or a trope, whatever you want to call it. You get the idea. Moving on. Jacob Belchek. Hi, Bill. First, I love your work. Thank you, Jacob. Very nice of you. Saw lots of positive comments concerning you on Daily Wire's Cold War video. Keep your head up, Bill. You've still got your mojo. Thank you. The comments on that have been really remarkable. And I'm very, very uplifted by them. I really think the interview show will help connect that mojo to an audience starved for genuine conversation. A word of caution. Remember the 3 axes of attracting an audience in modern YouTube. Long, unedited things punch way above their weight for their production difficulty. Don't be afraid to let your guests talk for 2 or 3 hours if their time allows and they are interested. Now for the questions. Let me deal with what you're saying there first. The thing that made me excited about this idea, as I've said many times, is that I did this for 5 years. I did nothing but this. I would listen to a 45-minute conversation, which will often wander around a little bit, and sometimes not a little bit. And I never took notes. I would just watch the tape for the first time, and anytime something would happen, I'd put a little marker down in my head, like, okay, that I can connect to something I heard earlier, and I just let it play. None of this is really interesting, and that's good. And then I would just lay it down and just start tightening it up and pulling it up. And my answer to this basically here is, if I get somebody talking for 45 minutes or an hour, I'm not going to cut anything interesting out of it. I don't have an artificial deadline as I did on Sunday Morning Shootout, which was, I keep saying 23:30, but it must have been more like 27:30, whatever. 27 minutes, 30 seconds to the frame. I don't have that restriction. Now, what I think I'll probably do is, and I think is what I fully expect, is I expect that out of every one of these interviews, I'm going to get, out of most of them, I'm going to get at least two conversations about different archetypes, and maybe 2 conversations about the same archetype, but in different things. For example, I want to talk to John Voight about the innocent. About the innocent, the tough guy who's basically got a heart of gold on the inside. And I'm going to talk to him about the champ, and I'm going to talk to him about Midnight Cowboy. And I've got a bunch of questions and cues that talk about what is the script showing us as an audience to say that this guy's not a good guy, and then what is it showing us about him to say that he actually is a good guy underneath. And what does the script decide to do? What does the writer decide to do? Because the writer's going to make a choice. In that particular case, you can have an innocent guy doing something bad, and you can have him end up realizing it's bad and stop doing it, or you can have him end up trapped in this endless spiral of despair, like what's that movie? Requiem for a Dream, which is one of the most depressing movies ever because it's very realistic, where you've got all of this hope and just entropy takes over and it just doesn't happen. If the conversation goes so that both of these 2 movies, as one example, are constantly being interreferenced, that'll be one piece. If one of them is specifically about one, another specifically about another, I'll boil 2 episodes out of it. And then I might release one of those 2 to the public. So I'm hoping to get from most of these interviews at least 2 edited segments from which I will pull the teases, which we'll put up on YouTube. And I'm tempted to make the lesser of the, if we get more than one, I'm tempted to make the lesser one public in order to drive people to the better ones, you know. So I think that's probably what I'll do. Back to Jacob again. Now for the questions. How would you describe the creative process? Are there process differences between creating something nonfiction, like an Empire of Terror script and a screenplay? Are you an outline-based writer or a discovery-based seat-of-your-pants writer? What advice do you have for improving creativity, creative output, the ability to create not observed in nature except in human beings? What do you think the implication of that might be? Well, that's really a great question. And this is the kind of question that I want to ask John, and John doesn't get these kind of fundamental questions. It's interesting, you talk about the difference between nonfiction stuff like Empire, Terror, Cold War, Apollo 11 versus, you know, the freeform stuff like The Colonies or Major Mace Mattingly or whatever the case may be. And I realized, I never really thought about it before, I realized that those are actually 2 different writers at work. The nonfiction writer is a historian who knows the basic. I picked something that I know that I've got a solid understanding of, and then that becomes. It's never. I'm not a note guy. I'm not that guy at all. Then it becomes, okay, I've got 4 episodes for Apollo 11. We'll just use that as an example. I want to tell the story of the space race, and you have to tell the story about the space race chronologically, because the entire point of the series was going to the moon's not so amazing if you look at the number of steps it took and how small the difference between any 2 steps was. So with the case of Apollo 11, I thought, okay, logically speaking, this thing should start with von Braun and Sputnik and end with, you know, Apollo 17. That's the linear way to do it. But immediately, I mean, from the get-go, I realized, no, this thing has to open on the moon landing. That's got to be the first thing out of the gate. If you're doing Apollo 11, what we saw, a 4-part series, you cannot have the moon landing be at the end of the last episode because nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's going to watch it. So in terms of a historical situation like that, I had a bit of a problem, and that problem was I had to tell the moon landing twice. I had to tell it at the very beginning of the first episode, and then I had to tell it again in the 4th episode where it got to chronologically, because it wasn't the space race what we saw, it's Apollo 11 what we saw, not even really the Apollo program. So I made the Apollo 11 landing the beginning of episode 1 and the beginning of episode 4. In the beginning of episode 1, it was a very subjective view of the moon landing, where I talk about being in the hotel and windows open and the animation. And now, to get to your question about the creative process, when I was doing the research on this thing, I was looking for the animation, because that's where YouTube and the internet's just great. Just looking for the animation, and found all the animation from CBS News, and I'm looking at all this other stuff. And I don't remember where it was. I don't remember maybe it was just when I was watching the animation live. But somewhere in the course of doing the research for Apollo 11, what we saw in early 2019, I'm watching a repeat of what I saw on CBS News on that night in July 20th of 1969, and I realize I'm seeing the LEM on the moon, but I'm hearing now, because I'm not amazed, now I'm hearing they're still talking to each other. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, something's going on here. And that's when I realized that the landing, the actual Apollo 11 landing, occurred about 30 seconds, 40 seconds after it was supposed to. The guys on the ground at CBS News, this was all pre-taped. So basically what they did was they talked to NASA, and NASA said, when we start PDI, powered descent initiation, once we start the retro burn on the lander, then the LEM will be on the moon 9 minutes and 23 seconds after that, something like that. So they made a segment that's 9 minutes and 23 seconds long. I don't know if the numbers in terms of altitude were pre-written. They look like they might have been chironed on top, but in any event, at the point where they're supposed to be on the moon, the CBS animation shows the LEM on the moon, and it says, man has landed on moon, something like that. And when you listen to because the audio was coming back live with a 1 second delay, when you're listening to the audio, you realize, but they you don't know what they're going to say, but 40 years after the fact, that there's none of this tranquility base here. You still hear Buzz saying, okay, drift into the light a little, 40 feet forward at 6, 4 to 6. You realize, holy crap, this thing's still going on. So then I got into the weeds about what was actually happening, and then I find out about all of the things like Armstrong having to take control, and then the 1202 error, and that. And so what that got me, Jacob, was it got me out of the gate. First 20 minutes or first 30 minutes of the first episode, I've got Neil and Buzz about to die. That's basically it, and that's true. And that to me was like, this is a strong opening. We're here, we're everything. Yeah, but that's not what's actually happening. They're on the moon on the simulation, but up there they're fighting for their lives. So writing the historical stuff like Empire of Terror really surprised me, because I pitched Empire of Terror as a look at, I was going to look at each one of the secret police leaders that were significant. Dzerzhinsky, Menzhinsky didn't do too much. Yagoda, Yezhov, Beria, Andropov, and Putin, I think, is where I was going to go with it. And that was what I pitched him. So I start working on Dzerzhinsky, and I'm realizing you can't make any sense out of this guy murdering all of these people unless you understand the government that sent him out to do it. And so Empire of Terror became essentially about Lenin, almost exclusively about Lenin. And every time I'd finish an episode and deliver it, I keep thinking to myself, well, I've only got 7 episodes. They gave me an extra one. I've only got 8 episodes, but I got to get to Stalin in here. So I don't think I get to Stalin until episode 5 or 6. And that's a situation where I think somebody described it as, you know what hole the rabbit went in, but you don't know what hole the rabbit's going to come out of. And that's just what happened. I just started following what interested me. And on all of those series, the 4 that I've done, Apollo 11, Cold War, America's Forgotten Heroes, and Empire of Terror, I'm like a net, just all of this flow of information is going by. Just here's history going by, and I'm just looking out at the river, and it's just history just flowing, and here's what actually happened. And what I'm trying to catch those moments that are interesting because they show you on a human level, on a scale that you can appreciate, what was actually going on there. And when I find those things, then I know I've got something. So that was the entire challenge for all of the nonfiction stuff, was how do you take these enormous events and find the human elements in them that make it a good story. There's something that brings it down to scale. You can't stay at that scale because you're dealing with mass murder or landing on the moon or whatever. But you got to constantly go back. You got to jump back down to the human level that people can connect to on an emotional basis, that they can say, yeah, I know what that feels like. So one of my very, very favorite pieces in the Apollo thing, it might have been my favorite nonfiction piece ever, I saved for the second time we do the moon landing. And that's in episode 4. It's that picture of Armstrong after they've landed on the moon, and he's got this expression. The more I looked at it, I just said, yeah, this is Steely-Eyed Missile Man, but it's also a 6-year-old kid looking out the window. I mean, looking around the corner on Christmas morning, And I the more I looked at that picture, the more I saw in there, the relief and all this other stuff, and that's when the music kind of takes over, and it just just kind of comes out. On the nonfiction scale, it's much more chaotic. When I find an idea that I like we've been talking a lot about Mattingly, for example. Once I find an idea that I like, the reason that build time exists, the reason there is this thing called build time, which is much, much slower than real time, is because the kind of mind that makes for good planning and having things come out on time is a mind that's very ordered and very disciplined in terms of, this is the time we have to do this, and then we move on, we do this, and we got to do this and do this, do this. But I find for myself, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I am saying I'm not sure of anybody, I don't think I know of anybody who does it. My disorganization and difficulty with procedures and getting things finished, especially on time, is a result of the disordered. It's not that my mind is disordered or disorderly. God knows it's a dim, dark place of unbending horror. But things are very loose up there. Things slide around a lot, and a lot of the best political commentary I've done was the ability to take one thing and connect it to something else that didn't seem like it should be connected to. I used to describe this in the eject days as saying, I'm going to take you out the door, I'm going to take you for a walk, and you're not going to know where you're going. I'm going to make sure you enjoy the walk, and then you're going to walk into the house from the back door, and when you come in the back door into the living room, you're going to see what you saw at the beginning of the walk, but you're going to see it an entirely different way. So I'll find myself driving along or something, and I'll just think about, like the thing we talked about a little while ago. How do you build these modules on the moon? How do you build them? This is what serious writers do. Now, this is something that's unique, I think, to science fiction and fantasy writers. This is world building, and if you don't take this seriously, you're going to end up with what used to be great shows and now garbage. Take Star Wars, for example. In Star Wars, the lightsaber was such a terrifying weapon because you could see it cutting through hardened steel. It just go through walls. Just cut a hole in a wall with it. And you realize, my God, this thing can do that to steel. Just cut somebody in half, right? And so the lightsaber became iconic for Star Wars because it represented absolute power, but also required tremendous mastery. You couldn't just go swinging that thing around like Luke does when he first picks one up and nearly takes his own head off. It requires discipline because it is so deadly. It's just living death, this lightsaber. And when people who were writing Star Wars knew what they were doing, there was you could tell if you look back at it, there was an ethic that exists among swordsmen throughout history, which is, I am not going to draw that sword unless I have to, and if I draw the sword, then I have to blood the sword. In other words, I'm not going to be quick on the trigger. I'm not. But if I do have to draw my sword, I'm going to kill somebody with it. And that's how most gun owners behave too. It's like, I'm not going to that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm not going to flash us around for effect, right? This is not the kind of thing I'm just going to wave in the air and say, yeah, you better back off because I got this lightsaber here. No. It's like, I'm going to hold off drawing this until my life is in danger. I'm talking about for the Jedi, or people are in danger of their lives, and then I'm going to draw it. I'm going to use the minimum force necessary. I'm going to put it away. This is how responsible gun ownership works and how self-defense laws work. So this thing is supposed to be, it's the ultimate in personal power. And it's devolved from that over time to the point where in the last 2 or 3 episodes of Star Wars series, people have been run through with a lightsaber, and then they end up waking up the next day in the hospital. Ooh, a nasty little scar you got there. Yep. Lightsaber went right through my guts and right out my spine. It's 15,000 degrees hot. Trigger did something in a lightsaber would actually do to you, which I didn't think was his best work ever. But basically, it's like, this is the deadliest weapon ever. And if you're so bloody lazy that you're going to have somebody stabbed with a lightsaber to show, oh, I want you to care about this person. Oh, look, she got stabbed with a lightsaber. She must be dead. Oh, no, she's fine. It's just cheap. It doesn't raise anything. All it does is it reduces the lightsaber. It just makes it, oh, okay. It's like getting stuck with a paper opener or something, these lightsabers in, right? I mean, if it turned out that you could just stick it into somebody and pull it out and have them just be in the hospital, then maybe next time I ought to move it around a little bit. So it's taken the lightsaber down to the level of just essentially a nuisance. It's no longer what it used to be. Luke Skywalker holding the lightsaber over his head is the iconic image of Star Wars. And they have reduced that to an absolute joke. Just a joke. Now, that's just plain bad writing. And it's more than anything, it's lazy writing. The laziest writing I've ever seen, ever, talked about this a couple weeks ago, is George Lucas, who's not a writer. In the Force Awakens, the Phantom Menace, he's got to show the audience. He could show them, by the way. He doesn't. He breaks the first rule of screenwriting, which is don't tell somebody, show somebody. He just smashes that rule to the ground. He's got Qui-Gon down on the planet talking with young Anakin, and he wants to tell the audience that this kid has tremendous force potential, right? Tremendous force potential. And instead of showing this, which would be easy, the kid's walking along and somebody knocks a building stone the size of him, comes off of a building, he sees it and flinches, and then the rock just hangs in the air there or is deflected. That's showing people, right? The kid's had no training. He's just about to be crushed to death by something, and just out of reflex, he's able to deflect it. That would show you that this boy has got tremendous force powers, and he hasn't even, and nobody knows about it. That took me 30 seconds to come up with this idea. But what does Lucas do? Lucas says, well, I really want to show how he's like unlike any other Jedi ever. I'm not going to show it. I'm going to tell it. Take a blood sample. Really? Yes, his midichlorian count is off the scale. It's even higher than Master Yoda's. Oh, okay, so it's all about midichlorians now. So you've either got them or you don't. I'm a little uncomfortable talking about Star Wars because I'm much more familiar with Trek, but I think this is pretty much on target here. What he's basically saying is, you don't get to be a Jedi if you want to be a Jedi. It's not a question of having the desire and training, because that's what you always had before. You had to want it. Luke Skywalker wanted to be a Jedi, and he went to do the training. He had natural ability, but you could become one if you worked hard enough. Now, it's out of your hands. What's your midichlorian count? 17? Sorry, no. You can come to the Jedi temple, but you're going to be washing the dishes there. With that kind of midichlorian count, no. And so, just out of sheer laziness and stupidity and lack of talent, he goes with this cheap shot, and it gets filmed and it gets released, and after it's over, and this is a fundamental error. This is not the same kind of thing as a technical error like the hyperdrive engaging, because if it turns out you can engage the hyperdrive and you go right through people and just destroy an entire fleet, then all you really need to do is just get a hyperdrive, attach it to a dumpster, let's say, and launch it. And they didn't realize that until after it was over, because they don't care. They're not smart enough. They're not smart enough to write science fiction, and they're not smart enough to write fantasy. We saw the same thing, and Charlie Hopkinson did a great parody of it, where in Lord of the Rings, you've got Boromir, the mighty Boromir. He's physically stronger than Aragorn. He's the strongest, toughest guy in the Fellowship, and he's fighting off these Uruk-hai, and he makes this heroic stand, and he finally catches 3 arrows, and the arrows are like practically as thick as broom handles. And finally he goes down and dies. Takes 3 hours and goes down and dies. And it's heroic and it's epic, and he saved Frodo, so he died for some reason. He redeemed himself because he'd been tempted by the ring earlier. Perfectly written, because Tolkien is not only a good writer, he's one of the greatest writers ever lived. Brilliant, perfect. And he's always had this issue with Aragorn, and now he's lying there dying, and he says, "My captain, my king," and everybody's crying, and I'm crying, and everybody's great because he was a well-acted, well-written character that you cared about, who looked like he was going to go bad, but he redeemed himself and gave his life to keep the mission going. Perfect. That's how you deal with heroes. Perfect. Then in Rings of Power, some chick, and that's all she is really, compared to physically. You put Sean Bean up against the wall next to the person who played whatever this character was in Rings of Power, and she's an innkeeper or something, and she gets shot with 2 or 3 arrows, and she, you all right, Mom? Yeah. Oh, that really stings. And by the way, it really stings. Didn't kill you, and you never, ever, ever, ever see it again. You never see her wince. Never see her grimace. You never see her weak. You never see her range of motion. No, she's been shot with 2 arrows, 3 arrows. Killed Boromir, but she's she's a girl boss. She's a strong, powerful woman. Couldn't be brought down by arrows. So, okay, all right. What have you done? Have you raised her to the level of Boromir? No, you just made a joke out of it. And I was going to say you've ruined Boromir's death, but you can't ruin Boromir's death. You hacks can't touch the original material. You can hack at Star Wars and Star Trek and Lord of the Rings all you want to, and you can turn out this endless, relentless garbage, because it is. It's just plain garbage, written by bad writers who have no talent and no life experience to draw on. And you can call it Lord of the Rings, and you can own the copyright to Lord of the Rings, and you can have the same names and all the rest of it, but it doesn't matter. It's garbage. It's fan fiction. It's non-canonical. I don't care who released it. It's junk. It's junk. You cannot touch the originals. You can tarnish the name, that you can do, but you can't undo what got done by people with talent who started these things that became world-changing. I hate to use the word franchise because they're so much bigger than that. They're philosophies, religions practically. So there you go. So with the fiction writing, I just find myself, seeing these scenes. When I was talking with Jeremy last, he said he actually went looking. They had an idea that maybe they make big bad plot problems. He went looking for the script, and he kept trying to find it. And then he said, "I can't find the script." And he realized, I said, "That's because it didn't get written. I haven't written it yet." And he said, "I realized you've told me the story in such detail so many times that I can't believe it's not on paper." I said, "No, it's up here." Now that's my fault. I'm not defending that. It's just plain unprofessional and irresponsible. But the point of it is that I've seen Big Bat Problems 40 times. I've seen the whole movie 40 times. And that's how I work on the fiction side. I'll see something and I'll have a problem to solve, like the problem of how do you build these modules. Okay, well, we could have a crane, but then what happened to the crane? And how'd you get the crane? And crane's kind of, crane is just kind of mundane. What could we do that would be in the spirit of the thing? What if they just flew the stuff down? And then I thought, okay, well, what are they going to fly it down on? Well, let's find something that's as difficult as possible. Oh, here's a model. Here's the 3D. This is a lot of how it works too, by the way. I often will I don't get to say, build me this. I've got to go looking at these existing 3D assets. And that I have done an awful lot of time looking at these things. And I'll see something and go, well, that's kind of cool. How could I use that? And then it just kind of goes away. And then later I realize, how am I going to get this thing down there? Oh, flying bedstead. Because it's got dissipated things. And so you can't. Yeah, that'll work. Sure, absolutely. It's great. So hopefully that helped. What advice do I have for improving creativity and creative output? My advice would be find something you really like and make sure that it's something that you know a lot about, because you can't do the kind of things that I've been describing unless you understand the environment. I couldn't have, I'm just using one very small example just because it came up today. It's just going to be a cool sequence. I couldn't have Doug hand flying a lunar landing attached to several tons of metal in an open cockpit. I couldn't even imagine a scene like that, or certainly couldn't write it unless I knew enough about how orbits work, how momentum works, how rockets work, all of this stuff. My biggest problem with the flying bedstead is I'm still trying to think about how do I deflect the rocket blast. I thought about I think I might do this too. I might put the rocket engines on the four corners and then, I don't know. Then it would look like the thing that landed on Mars. So again, you got to know what you're talking about. But once you get something that you like, the thing to do is just daydream about it and just kind of follow your characters through a day, and then eventually things will start to connect themselves. Hopefully. We'll see. Here's Eric Blake. Submitting for your approval is a quick little something I cooked up last week. As someone all too aware of politics being downstream of culture, I trust you can understand where it's coming from. Here's the link. So it's a giant case of Bud Light, and then you're panning across, and here's Heineken's, and Heineken's $9.98 and sold out. Okay, so it's kind of a documentary thing. $9.98, sold out. Nope, there's no Heineken there. I don't have the sound up. Is that you, Eric? I will listen to it afterwards. It is. Well, I'll be darned. How about that? We finally get to see the elusive sighting of the actual Eric Blake. Terrific. So I will take a look at that with the sound on. I hadn't been expecting it. If I had been, I would have downloaded it and played it, but these things are difficult, especially with two streams open, so maybe I'll try to remember to do that next time and run it next time. So how do I save this? Let me just bookmark. I'll bookmark the page. You're going to get a spot on my bookmark bar, Eric, and I'm here to tell you that is a high honor because I don't do that very often. So we'll try and show that for everybody next time. So congratulations, look cool, and it was good to see you finally. Shocking and horrifying, but gratifying as well. Where are we? Okay, we got Chris Taylor, we got CP Tomes. We'll do them both, and then we're going home. Chris Taylor always has such incredibly interesting things to say and such valid real-world points. Let's see what we got here. On your interview show, you might find some very interesting interview subjects in various distinguished speaker or lecturer programs that many technical, trade, or business organizations fund. Remember, Ronald Reagan was a traveling lecturer for GE at one time. He certainly was. Ronald Reagan learned how to become Ronald Reagan doing the GE tour. He, for those of you not familiar, after his Hollywood career, before he really got into politics, General Electric hired him to tour the country. And he basically went around in like a Winnebago. And he had a lot of time to kill. And he listened to people as he was doing these live lectures, very similar to the kind of speaking events I used to do. And there was some time on his hands and started writing some stuff down, and he basically assembled his conservative worldview. It's not like he invented it. He had feelings about things. But so much of Reagan's view of America and conservatives came from talking to Americans. So, yes, great point. My professional society, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, dude, you just won the internet. I did not know you were a member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, but from now on I'm calling you Mr. Taylor, Dr. Taylor, whatever the case may be. Has a distinguished speaker program. Any of them from this or past years should be able to give good interviews on their technical subjects. Past AIAA speakers have included multiple test pilots and the former commandant of the USAF Test Pilot School, Kilowatt Kiloway, Kilowatt Calloway. I know a former speaker who works for the Aerospace Corporation, lives in LA, and loves opportunity to talk about his expertise of nuclear, exotic, and breakthrough physics space propulsion research. That's a guy I would like to talk to. You know enough to ask him far, far more interesting questions than most hosts would, and I'd be happy to send you his contact info. Okay? Probably, I'm trying to think about archetypes here, but I'm 100% in. Probably lots of technical societies from farming to astronomy have interesting, well-spoken Americans with important insights who'd love to just sit down with an interviewer that isn't looking for a 10-second soundbite for TikTok or a quote to justify their political crusade. Well, that's all I'm interested in personally. I don't know if they would all fit with archetypes, but maybe you could interview them when you get your guest host for Hot Mic. When you guest host for Hot Mic, by the way, thank you for creating the cool intro music. Okay, well, as usual, Dr. Taylor, I have the contact info. I have not contacted him yet for Jack Schmidt. And if I get him, then I will probably put him in the Explorer archetype. Listening to some of these people you got here, a steely-eyed missile man, fighter pilot, these kind of things are archetypes. And by the way, it doesn't, and this was a big relief to me when I finally got back to archetypes and settled on it. I realized that it doesn't have to be one per customer. In other words, you could have 3 different individuals listed as steely-eyed missile men, and you'd get different angles on that archetype from each one of them. So that was when I realized, no, you don't have to keep inventing things. You can put a number of people into the same categories and stuff. This sounds like the inventor or the innovator. Look, just so we're crystal clear on this, I can create any title I want to, put a "the" above it, and ta-da, it's an archetype as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to be very careful about that because I don't want to degrade the definition of it. I've mentioned many times that Classics had, I think, 8, and then I saw a site that had 214 or something like that. And of that 214, there were many that were authentic and good, and some that were just plain silly. A character, an archetype that I think is a real archetype is the best friend. But they got much too specific about some of these things, and I just said I'm going to just go through the list. I'm going to pick the ones I want. I'm going to add whatever I want to. And as the show goes on, I can keep chucking them in there. Doesn't matter. It gives the show focus and purpose. It's about something. It's not about it's not just a talk show. So Eric Blake says the Lieutenant Dan and the Ken Mattingly. Yes, but I can talk to Gary Sinise about the Redeemed, and I can talk to him also about the Stoic. And I can talk to other people about these things. If it wasn't so lengthy, and it doesn't mean I won't do it, one of the archetypes I was thinking about when I was thinking about Lieutenant Dan was the one who returns from the dead. There's been a number of stories about people like Orpheus and a number of cases where people have returned from the dead. And I think that's what Lieutenant Dan is. I think he's a person who's returned from the dead. And I think that's the angle to take a look at. So I would be very interested in talking to these guys about all of these things. Hang on one second. I have a super chat, first one of the night, from JDoc. How the heck do I tip you on Streamlabs? It never works for me for some reason. Rather do it there and paying 3% rather than the 30%. All it does is give me tipping data, but nowhere to put info. Wow. Thank you. I don't know how it works on. I know that on YouTube, I get a check from YouTube for ad revenues, which is not a lot of money. It could have been, and it was one time briefly. And so these super chats get added to that, and I get paid by YouTube every 21st of the month or something like that. and I'm extremely grateful for all of it. I don't know what their internals are or what the rate is. I'll tell you what I can do and will do if you'll just hang on 1 second, because it's extremely kind of you, and I deeply appreciate it. Hang on a second, I'm just working on something here. I'm going to have to open a new browser to comment on this here. Hang on 1 second. Again, JDoc, I'm very grateful. It's very, very kind for somebody to not only want to hit the tip jar, but also say, hey, your tip jar's not really working. I am putting in the YouTube chat now a link, and I'll put it in the Twitch chat as well. This allows you to do a PayPal donation directly to me at BillWhittle.com, and I'm not entirely sure what their percentage is, but I think it's actually rather small, only because they do so much business. So first of all, I will get both of these super chats. Thank you very much, Veronica. That I will get that money, and I'm very grateful for all of it. Pop it in here. But it has been working and has been deeply appreciated. So I don't know if you're more comfortable with this, but also, by the way, for some people are more comfortable with this. At the link, there is a mailing address as well, because some people would prefer to send a check, and I certainly understand how that works. So thank you. We should know where the money box is, Bill. I want all the money to go to you. Well, the super chats do work. I do get that money, and there's also now like a super thanks, which I need to explore. And I want to get, and thank you very much, Veronica, and all of you guys. Thank you very, very much. So I've just got so many things I have to get open and going, but once I get them open and going, I've been better at getting some of these things going. And I might, again, it's just mostly just finding time. But I do have some Patreon members. Then there was a lot of kind of blowback against Patreon, but I have not been doing Patreon-only content, and I may decide to open up some or all of the, well, not all of the BillWhittle.com stuff, member stuff out of the interviews, but some of it certainly I think I can set aside for Patreon members and see if we can, grow all of these things together. It's just something I'm extremely grateful for, and never ceases to raise my spirits. So thank you very much for all of that. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Okay, I think we got one left. Two. Thank you. I hope that solved it. Wow. Okay, I think that's it. Last one from our friend CP Tomes, who's using extra bold type. So you better pay attention to this one, Bill, because this is when you break out the extra bold, large letter, large font, you're dealing with an issue that needs to be dealt with right away. From an undisclosed location in flyover country in a state that saw the start of the great communicator, Illinois, Indiana. Darth Chuck the Mirthless Dithers, with the end of the new space race in sight, one of the early leaders, John Carmack, posted on X today, could Starlink satellites be used as an Earth-sized synthetic aperture radio dish to scan the universe? Wow. The actual question to Dear Leader, CSR actual, that'd be me, the inestimable Bill Whittle is thus: if the Project Horizon crew were in a position to do science impossible to accomplish from Earth, would they do it just because they can? That's a great question, and a lot of what I talked about earlier, Charles, is these guys doing things because that's their routine and their duty, and that's what preserves their sanity. I certainly don't want to make the base any bigger than it is, but what I can do and have always planned to do is have remote sites that are significantly smaller. For example, These guys don't have to be at the South Pole. It's probably better for them to be at near the South Pole, because you can be behind the crater rims anywhere on the outside. Let me think about this. Okay, so if you take a look at the full moon from Earth, the view from Earth of the moon is essentially the same regardless of the lighting, full moon, first quarter, waning, waxing, all that, just lighting. But the full moon on Earth, what's the term? Libation. So as the moon orbits the Earth, it rotates just a little bit like this every orbit. It just does that. It's not more than 5, 6, 7 degrees, something like that, right? And so you can technically, from Earth, you can see more than half of the moon. You can never see more than half at any one time, but because over the course of the orbit, the moon does a little bit of this, you actually do get to see more of the moon than 50%. You get to see this 50%, and then you get to see that 50%, and that's libation. Libration? I thought it was libation. Maybe I'm thinking of drinking. Libration. In any event, this lib thing, this libiness, allows you to do that. Now, if you think about it, if you put a base anywhere on the outside of the moon, you could hide it behind a crater wall, but because of this libration, it would expose itself. But if you do it near the pole, the total rotation at the poles is relatively small compared to the total rotation at the equator. So I don't have to have the base in the perpetual darkness of the South Pole. I just have to have it close enough so that they can build the base against the side of the crater wall so that it's not directly visible from Earth. A great example to tie this into the previous question about creativity is this. One of the things I've been worried about, because I take this seriously, I take this moon base seriously, I take major mathematically seriously, I take the whole idea seriously. That's how it works. That's how it gets good, is taking it seriously. So one of the things I had to take seriously is, okay, well, how come these guys haven't been discovered earlier? Okay, well, you hide it behind a crater wall. You're good from you're not going to be accidentally discovered there. You're not going to be seen from the ground, because while you wouldn't see the base from the ground, especially on amateur telescopes, you might conceivably see the lights. So, all right, so you got them behind a crater wall. That'll work. That's good. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, what about the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter? And I thought, son of a bitch. So this is how world building works. So the second stage in this watching the movie play in my head is, first stage is hide the base from the Earth. Got it. Second stage is, what do you do about something like LRO, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter? The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter can image the Apollo landing sites, but they had to lower their orbit to do it. Now, this base is much bigger than the LEM, but it's not large enough to be seen from, certainly not from Earth, and it's not big enough to be seen in a general photograph unless you're looking right at it. In darkness, you're pretty good. So I thought, okay, they'll know what the orbit of the LRO is, and then there will be LRO blackouts, and these things will be known with high precision. So, in the middle of a conversation, so, okay, hang on a second, we got 6 minutes here. You guy's just going to run over to console, it's just going to darken the base. Cut it off, make it dark, so that when LRO goes over, it's got nothing to draw its attention. Unless LRO is looking deeply, specifically at that one area, they won't see it, because the moon is really, 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 really big. So that's stage 2, and now comes stage 3 of how this creative process works. I do have a little radar station. Now, technically, that's an emitter, okay, and that could be a problem. But I thought, okay, so what the hell is this radar looking for? Well, it's looking for LRO. Well, we already know where LRO is. We don't need a radar for that. But I want a radar station because it looks cool. So why do I have a radar station on this base? Then I realized I have a radar station on the base because then I can write scenes like this. These guys are sitting there having a conversation and everything's fine, and And all of a sudden, this alarm goes off. Radar contact, bop, 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 bop. And they're looking at the radar repeater, and sure enough, right at the outer edge, they can see this blip. Because I don't believe that the LRO is a radar detector. They see this blip. They say, "What the hell is this?" You know, it's like it's the LRO, but it's not. It's changed. They've changed its orbit. So they run over, and I've got it on the console. I've got the piece already embedded. There's one of those big red panic buttons, like the buttons on a nuclear reactor, and it's called emergency blackout. And he just reaches over and smashes it, and poof! Everything just goes completely black. Everything just goes down, and you know, they got it on the radar. They turn the radar off, and they're looking out the window, and you see the little speck moving over. Did they? You know? Do you think they got us? We're going to find out, you know. But I don't think they got us now. And so that's how you work all of these kind of elements together from like a creative point of view. I want a radar station turning because it's motion. It's motion. I want something moving on that base. And radar is cool and it's appropriate for the technology, so they got a little radar thing spinning. I love it. I think it looks great. So I got my radar. How do I avoid the being detected problem? Hide them against a crater wall, get them away from Earth. Good. What about LRO? Well, they'll know where the orbits are, and when LRO is going to come close, then they'll just darken the base, and then that's good. And then, so what's the point of the radar? Well, they changed the orbit on LRO. They've already done that. So all of a sudden, they're just sitting there eating their apple pie, and boom, we got a problem, something up there. Now, since they're going to be close to the South Pole, one of the things I can do, this is how creative works for me. On fiction, my creative process works by solving problems. The entire design of the Aurora that I did back in 2007 with these long halves and rotating cables and the transfer modules, all of that came from a simple problem, and that problem is if I wanted a probe that would go to Jupiter, I needed a long radius so that the spinning got you 1G at the bottom, and it wasn't spinning so fast that the thing would come apart, and it wasn't spinning so fast that the gradient between your feet and your head, all of that. I had to get a long distance out here. Now, you could just put that on a rigid rail, but when you're under acceleration, that force is perpendicular to those arms. And because it's perpendicular to them, because they're so far out there and they're so massive, it puts tremendous moment on that arm. In other words, you can hold a bucket of water, 2 buckets of water, one in each hand, fairly close to your side, and that's fine. Try holding 2 buckets of water out here for a while. It's not going to happen because that's called moment. Okay? So solving problems is how the most interesting things come up for me. And that was the story with the radar, and I was going somewhere with this. What was it? How do you build this base? Well, you got to get them down on a module. Well, you use the lander. Well, what kind of lander? You know, we can't have it be too high tech looking because then it looks like science fiction. It looks like, you know, I could have a 4-engine lander thing, but then there's thousands of those things. It's just too early. So I got to think of something. Oh, this would work. So all of this stuff to say this is how the process works. What was that one point about it? It just has just on the tip of my tongue, or the tip of my brain, whatever you want to call it. India. So I'm unlike the Chinese. And I have a lot of respect for the Russians because of what they did and how they did it. They showed the same kind of guts we did, and they just didn't have the resources. But arguably, in fact, I think you make look, you get into a rocket, it's dangerous. You're going to the moon, it's dangerous. So it's not like it's less dangerous for the Apollo guys, but certainly the Soviet cosmonauts were taking more of a big risk than the American astronauts who were taking a big risk. So I've got the space in the South Pole, and now all of a sudden, India's got a lander there. Now, we haven't made the announcement about Project Horizon to Earth yet. I've still got to work this timeline out. But basically, now I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what do I do now where I've got a moon base? And what if I have the base, because I already know where the lander is, you see, I haven't put the base down yet. I know its general area, and I know that the Indian lander is at the South Pole somewhere. So where can I find on the moon, on the real moon, where can I find a base that's close to the lander but not under the lander? Because that gives me an interesting scene, and here's the scene. They're looking at this, and they're reading the news reports and stuff, and I personally think this would be very flattering for India. I hope it would be. I want to do the best I can. India went splat. I know one of their landers failed, but the other one landed, right? Okay, so it's like, okay, we got a problem, guys, in the conference room. Right? What are we going to do? Well, how far away is this lander? Well, it turns out the lander's 7 miles from us. That's not good. We're behind the crater wall, yes, but it's 7 miles or whatever. That's not good. And over the course of time, in the course of this one particular episode, you can see that the Indian rover is starting to head their way. Then you can have a scene where they're saying, I would hate to do this, but if they get to the Claymore line, we're just going to have to shred that thing. Well, if it gets to the Claymore line, you're going to have all kinds of other problems. They're going to start looking for the wreckage of the thing. It's just lights are going to go out, and then they're going to find us. And, you're right. Okay, so we're going to have to, if this thing starts coming our way, we're going to have to go out there and take it out as far away from the base as possible, because when they try to image what happened to their missing lander, we don't want them looking down on our heads. So then it's like, well, looks like we finally found some use for the bazooka then, huh? Because they got in the storeroom, and out there in the case, they got a couple of frickin' anti-tank weapons. Unguided. That gets me to a scene where I've got 2 American astronauts with a cherry red buggy hiding behind the rim of a crater, not our crater, a different crater, creeping up, getting out the binoculars and seeing that little Indian rover kind of coming their way. And it's getting closer and closer and closer, and they're saying, come on, turn around. Come on, turn around. You guys worked really hard for this, Turn around. And it thing gets closer and closer and closer, and then finally it stops, And it's like, come on. Just turn around. And then it just kind of goes off to the side, And it's like, that tells you so much. It's like, first of all, we're armed to the teeth. Secondly, we want them to succeed. And it presages, it foreshadows 2 scenes that I really am going to do and that I'm looking forward to doing. One of them is essentially the thing I've been talking about for God knows how long, where you have the American astronauts watching the Chinese land on the moon, and they're just going, oh, well, congratulations, you made it 55 years after we did. But I love the idea of these Americans driving their little frickin' jet packs or whatever, or their cherry red moon buggies to within visual distance of where the Chinese are going to land, and they just watch the whole thing come down. It's like, yeah, all right, not bad, not bad, well done. I want to see that scene, and the other scene I want to see, and I don't have to tell all these in chronological order. In fact, one of the great things about metahumans is I can keep the same face and age them or de-age them just by picking the skin. I can make Mace 80 years old. I can make Mace 18 years old. I can make Mace 23 or 27. So I can make a younger Mace easily and have them sitting there in 1969. And you wouldn't start with them. You would just start with the LEM, the Eagle, and you'd hear the transmissions and you hear buzz, and you see this thing from the ground and you see it hovering and all this other stuff, and it's like, and then you're Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. And you let that sit for a couple of minutes, and then off in the distance, some several miles away, you got these 2 guys, or 4 guys, basically, maybe, and they've all got binoculars with, it's like, you son of a bitch, Neil Armstrong, you did it again, you incredible frickin' bastard. A little tougher this time, But man, how did he manage to land that thing when the first time he landed was just, that so much more sophisticated. It's like going from a Cadillac to a VW. You know, figure out what the actual dialogue would be. But basically, this is how you tell the story. That I love this. This one of the again problem solving. So, what's the problem? Well, the problem is these guys have a moon base in 1966. Okay, Americans on the moon. That's good. We just got there earlier. Yep. So we landed on the moon in 1966, and we landed publicly in 1969. That's great. Only that means that somebody else was the first man on the moon. And that bothered me enormously. It just plain really, really bothered me. Because I was thinking, oh, so Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man on the moon. I worship Neil Armstrong. I worship him. So, what I decided to do was to have, I don't care so much about Buzz. I'm sorry, I just don't. It's not because he was second. It's just because the character of the man and the character of Neil, this is an emotional reaction, so there you go. I'm tempted to have well, never mind. So what the backstory is going to be is that when Project Horizon made the first landing on the moon in 1966, early 1966, they had to get the best guy that they had, and the best guy they had was Neil Armstrong, even then. So they got Neil, and Neil did the moon landing in 1966, and as soon as he got that thing down on the ground, showed everybody how to do it, he got back from his vacation in the Caribbean, or wherever the hell he was, and ideally I'll be able to find some actually verifiable historical situation where Neil Armstrong went on a vacation for 3 weeks or whatever. It's like, well, he didn't actually go on vacation. So I get to have Neil Armstrong be the first man on the moon. And you've seen pictures of Neil in the Gemini capsule. He's considerably younger. And it's like, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll make it Neil and Buzz. I don't know. But the way I justify this is, I justify this by saying at least this one guy, and arguably the two, he was the best. And they picked him because they needed the best shot that they had. The first moon landing for Horizon was going to be the difficult one. They were going to set up a pad after that. They're going to put navigational beacons. The thing was huge, by the way, whatever the first landing thing was for Horizon. And they had to have somebody who simply had all of the elements. They had to have a guy with a great engineering background, had a guy with great seat of the pants flying, good stick and rudder guy. But mostly, since everything depended on this landing, they needed a guy who was cool under pressure, and that was Neil Armstrong. And so they're going to basically say that his second landing was a lot tougher than the first one because he was working with junk. Because that's basically the subplot of this, is that NASA is just kind of it's kind of like the cast-off stuff. It's like, yeah, the real money, well, like I said, the only way I can explain them having this kind of real money is that the first thing they did in Project Horizon in 1959 or 60 was put a ton of money aside, get the aerospace companies involved, get the money into private hands, and then treat it as an investment fund. So they may have started out with $10 billion, but now they've got $4 trillion because the money was used intelligently, unlike the government. And I even like the fact that they paid the government back. So that's how you solve problems. And this is the single most important thing. If you're not lazy about things, if you're not lazy about them, the more difficult the problem is, the more impressive your story will be when you solve it. When I put those habitats out there on the Aurora, and I'll get some renders of that in my abundant free time, but I do have the model. I thought, okay, so if we got 4 guys over here and 4 guys over here, what if they want to talk to each other? What if they want to go back and forth? Well, they'd have to reel all of these things in, and that increases the spin. There's a conservation of momentum. All the rest of this stuff is like, that's a lot of trouble. What if instead of having to reel all these things in, what if they stayed out there for the entire cruise because you got them in close and they're supported with braces. You do the burn. Now you're coasting the whole way. You just start spinning the ship, and then you let these things reel out, and the whole ship is turning. It's not like a center. The whole thing's turning golden. But if you wanted to move from one to the other, what would you do? Well, what if there was a tiny, tiny, tiny little capsule, just a real small little thing, and it went from one hab up to the center, and then you could get on the other one and go back? Yeah, that'll work. So long as there are two of them, and that they're moving in unison so that the mass never gets unbalanced. So I had these transfer modules. So they, in one hab, climb up to the top, into the module, close the airlock on both sides, and then a second set of cables would wheel these transfer modules in. The big modules are out there spinning. Yes, some of the mass is going to move, but it's insignificant compared to the total mass of these habitats, which is huge. And these things get closer and closer and closer. They dock, all right, with the centerpiece. They open up the inside, go from one to the other. There's weightless in here, get on the other one, back out again. It's not something you want to do every 10 minutes. It's not as easy as pushing an elevator button, but it was a problem. And I had to solve this problem. And as I said earlier, if you're going to play this game, and please do, be sure that it's something that you know and love, because that will allow you to solve these problems. You won't have to, you won't have to do that. I had an additional problem where I knew that, and I saw this to some degree, I think many years afterwards. I think I saw something almost exactly like it, and if I'd seen it 10 years ago, it would have broken my heart, but I've just kind of gotten past it now. But in any event, I've got these two enormous 4-story habitat modules that are swinging on these long cables, long cables. And I said, I need a scene where somebody is EVA with these things, because I want to see something the size of a 4-story building coming at me like this. I just want to see it. I think that would be cool. Okay, how do you solve that problem? Well, you can't do the EVA while they're under thrust, because you just leave the astronaut behind. And you can't do the EVA while they're still turning, because they will just take off on a tangent and just go be like a fastball pitched off into the universe. So how do you solve this problem? Well, the only way that this would work would be if the astronauts were climbing a ladder, because you can think of this thing vertically. Here's a hab module. This is up, same inverted. Here's a hab module. And if they were climbing a ladder to the core, that would work. Great. But you can't have a ladder there, because there is no ladder. You got these things, gets reeled in on cables and stuff. So I thought, okay, all right. The ladder is an emergency device. It's like a parachute. It's a soft ladder, and it deploys from the center hub, and the spin automatically takes these things out, and it trails for a while, but after a while it will come into equilibrium, and it will get close enough to the habs where they can just kind of clip it in, and then they can climb up this soft ladder to get to the core. And everything's moving. So I've got them outside. Great. That's still not what I wanted. So my problem is this. What kind of emergency would occur so that the transfer modules didn't work? Because if they do work, then there's no need for the ladder. But I need the astronauts outside from a creative point of view. So I've got to have a failure of the hab modules. But the failure has to make sense. And I don't remember exactly what the detail was. I've got the script somewhere on that one. That one I did write 300-page something or other on it. But there was a bearing that went bad. That's right. So the hab modules were in motion, and there was somebody in one, and it stopped just before it got to the core. And as this thing is moving, there's an alert that goes off that say one of these electric motors is drawing more power than usual. Now it's drawing a lot more power than usual. Okay, it's a bearing going bad. Now the decision is, what do we do? The guy's 2/3 of the way there. Do we want to back him back down? Or do we want to try and just keep increasing the juice and get him to the core? What's the safest way to do this? Well, he's so close to the core, they decide they're just going to increase the juice and try and get him up to the thing. So the thing goes a little bit further, and then it stops, and he's 6 feet or something. 6 feet's enough to kill you. And now they can't get up there. So they have to. So the engineers that are down in the have to deploy this ladder. So the ladder goes down. Great. Climbing the ladder, great. And what I really wanted, though, was this thing to come by. So somehow one of these guys has to fall off the ladder. But they can't fall, because if they fall, I'm trying to remember how the hell I did this. I know I worked out the physics of it. What it amounted to was there was a person who was either tethered to something. I genuinely don't remember how it worked, but they're just sitting there, and this whoosh, this thing comes, whoosh, and then there's another guy on the ladder who's going to catch them, and you got to realize, the impact is potentially fatal. So they want to catch them as high as possible because where the rotation speeds are lower. And so you basically got the scene where this guy's basically gotten up halfway and he's attached his safety line to the ladder. He pushes loose. He grabs this person. It's just a big bear hug. He's got lots of slack there. And he says, "Hang on." And then the slack gets taken up, and these two people just get just boom. They hit each other so hard that it cracks the helmet. But nevertheless, happy days. They manage to climb up there and so on. So that's how I write drama. I just think I've got a emotional requirement as a storyteller. I like having a radar station. I want to see what this thing looks like from the outside. And that's when the writing mind goes to bed and the thinking mind takes over. And that's when my knowledge of astronomy and physics and all the rest of it comes in handy. And that's what makes a good science fiction writer, is somebody who knows how the thing works. What does physics do? And you don't get lazy, In a later version of Aurora, I had and I hope to do this someday, although some days I'm running out of some days. We're at a space battle, and they had energy weapons, and I was talking about a laser attack, and then I thought, well, you can't see a laser in space. So now I've got a choice. I can either show the laser, and nobody's going to notice it because they're used to seeing lasers in space. If I show the laser, only the hardest of hardcore fans are going to say, "You showed a laser." But I've made myself a promise on that, and that was no magic. And so this is where the doing the work plays off. In Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games, they would say if you roll a character and you see these two things that don't make sense because the dice rolled, you've got an intelligence of 19 and an education of 2. That should tell you something. Likewise, an education of 19 and an intelligence of 2 should tell you something. So use it, work with it. So I thought, okay, no laser beam. So how is that interesting? And I realized it's much more interesting. You're just sitting there, and all of a sudden there's just this flickering, glowing light on the outside, and it just starts, vaporizing in gas. Plus, laser defense in Traveler, they called them sandcasters. You basically take a depth charge, and you launch it in the direction of the enemy ship, and you blow it up, and it's filled with sand. And now that laser has to come through that material, which means it has to vaporize all this sand. It's essentially take the bite out of the laser. And that you would see the laser going through. You wouldn't see the beam, but you would see all of the illuminated particles. And if they're close enough together, then you get nothing, flash of light through there like a lightning bolt. And then just this moving light on the, just barely moving light on the side of the hull. No noise, nothing. And I thought, that's not only cooler, it's just better. And no one's ever seen it before. No one has ever seen that before. Never been done before because nobody knows enough about it to be able to solve the problem. They don't know, so they just don't think about it, and then you get laser beams. Somebody was saying in the movies it's a strange world because lasers travel more slowly than the sound does. You can dodge a laser beam in space. So that's basically it. Well, we did all the questions, and it's 9 o'clock here local time, and I'm going to shut this thing off. I got a right angle to edit and post, and then we shoot some new ones tomorrow, and we'll see what's going on. So hopefully that was as fun listening to as it was talking about, but we will see. Jury's out on that one, I guess, although it sure is fun talking to you guys. Okay, well, as you may know by now, this show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who continue to pay monthly $9.95 or $19.95, in some cases $49.95, who have not been getting anything for that other than getting the message out, but they're about to get finally members benefits in form of I think what are going to be some really great interviews. So I'll give John a call tomorrow, see if we can get that scheduled, and as soon as I know, I'll let you know. It's possible it will happen before the Stratosphere Lounge, but unlikely. But if John says, hey, thank you very much, John, for that super chat. But if John says I can do it Thursday night at 6 o'clock, I said, done. And I'll sneak peek a 20-second bite of it as soon as I have it in the can. All right, so yeah, Steve Whoop says, damn, already scheduling? Steve, I'm 5 weeks talking about this thing now. Bill, I think I always feel like I'm never going fast enough, but this has got a lot to do. We got to get all this stuff fixed in, so we're good to go. Okay, so that'll do it. Thanks again for joining us. I'm going to shut down 2 streams now. We got the 2 reactors that we have to shut down nearly simultaneously, so I'm going to go to the YouTube stream, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say thanks very much for joining us, and hello YouTube, and we'll see you next time right here on your very own Stratosphere Studio.